Welcome to the Committee of the Whole meeting, August 17th, 2020. I'm Dennis Roberts of Ward 5. I'm going to be chairing the meeting tonight. I'd like to call this meeting to order, and I'd ask that the clerk please call the roll. And actually, I'd like to, before we call the roll, I'd like to make this announcement. Due to the Governor Pritzker and the mayoral emergency COVID-19 orders, the Urbana City Council chambers will not be open to the public during this meeting. Council members will meet remotely using Zoom webinar. You may watch the meeting on streaming services or on the Urbana Public Television, or attend via Zoom. And the Zoom address to dial in is on the agenda posted at the City Council website on the City Web page. And there's also a telephone call-in number for you to use.
Okay, are we ready now?
I think so, we are.
Okay, Ms. Wu,
Yes, here.
Ms. Laut,
Here.
Ms. Hersey,
Here.
Mr. Brown,
Here.
Mr. Roberts,
Here.
Mr. Colebrook,
Here.
Mr. Miller,
Here.
Mayor Marlin.
Here.
Okay, thank you. First on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from our previous meeting, which is dated August 3rd, 2020. Is there a motion?
Approval of those minutes.
Okay, thank you, Jared.
I'll second.
Thank you, Mary Alice Wu. Were there any corrections or adjustments to the agenda, to the minutes that we are discussing? Okay, I don't see anybody indicating that. Therefore, we'll approve the minutes. Therefore, we'll call the roll, please, to approve the minutes.
Ms. Wu,
Yes.
Ms. Laut,
Yes.
Ms. Hersey,
Yes.
Mr. Brown,
Yes.
Mr. Roberts,
Yes.
Mr. Colebrook,
Yes.
Mr. Miller.
Yes.
Okay, those are approved. Are there any additions to the agenda tonight? Okay, I don't see anybody making a motion for that. So we're going to go on to the body of our Committee of the Whole meeting. We have 3 items. We have a presentation about the library annual report, presentation about the open door, and we have public input. And then later we're going to have a closed session. So we're going to start with a presentation by the Urbana Free Library. We have Celeste Choate, the director of the library, here to guide us through that presentation.
Thank you very much for your time, everyone. You received a copy of the report that the library is obligated by statute to file with the state about the library and where we stand. So if you have any questions about that, I would be happy to take those. What I'd like to do first is show you a brief PowerPoint of the many, many things the library accomplished this year, partnering with our community members and through the efforts of our fabulous staff. So I'm going to share my screen and give you a tour. We're going to start back in the day, pre-COVID, which seems like a long time ago, but you're going to see lots of wonderful pictures of great programs. Can everyone see my screen okay?
Yes, we can.
Great. So you see 2 very proud, adorable young women who came to a program at the library. It's called Makerspace Junior. And what we found is that teenagers have such a good time that when their younger siblings came to pick them up at the library after the Teen Open Lab was done, that they wanted to get involved with the technology as well. So being responsive to our community, we started a new series of programs called Makerspace Junior so that families could learn how to use the same technologies. So you can see that they made pillows that someone donated fabric and stuffing for using our sewing machines. We also had the 3D printer and other technologies out there for families to explore together. Proud to be the leader of the Urbana Free Library with our amazing team of people. We went through a strategic planning process over the past year, and the board approved a plan that has 4 pillars. We embrace, we welcome all. We enrich, we spark curiosity, and you see there's some curiosity satisfied here in this picture. We empower, we contribute to a strong social fabric, and we enhance. We are a strong organization. Let's go to the next slide. So on this page, I want to show you pre-COVID, we were able to have events, and the library is a strong place in the community for wonderful community events. So the upper left portrait picture is of 3 young women who came to a Society of Women Engineers event. On the far upper right, we have an event, Bitter Cola Taste Sweet. In partnership with community members, we celebrated Black writers from around the world on February 20th. Nearly 50 attendees hailing from all around the world came to read authors' works of their choosing and participate in the celebration in one way or another. This program was co-sponsored by the University of Illinois Center for African Studies, a strong partner of ours. On the bottom left, we have author Kyle Lukoff. He read his new story, When Aiden Became a Brother, which is about a transgender boy getting ready for his new sibling to be born. So high quality programs. Kyle won the Stonewall Award from the American Library Association for this book. We are engaged with our community, and we host the CU Immigration Forum, the Immigrant Welcome Awards. This year was the 6th annual, and we can see the winners of the event down there on the bottom. And then we see Mahogany Brown, second from the right on the bottom. Mahogany Brown is a poet, and her event was in partnership with the Pygmalion Festival, and she read to a really happy crowd. And this event was sponsored by the Urbana Free Library Foundation. And what you're seeing on the wall in these different photos is skateboards. And you may be wondering, why does the library have skateboards on the wall? We received a public arts grant for teens to make art. We partnered with the Urbana High School and the Urbana Neighborhood Connection Center, and we bought skateboard decks, and then the students were able to create art on these skateboard decks, which were then hung on the walls throughout the year. We had an art opening with over 65 attendees, which was well attended, and the kids really enjoyed being respected as artists. And people coming into the auditorium really enjoyed having something on the walls. It really brightened up the space and made it more alive. On the bottom right, we have a picture of some of the members of the League of Women Voters who had a number of programs throughout the year, including celebrating 100 years of the women's vote, as well as registering people to vote on different days. So we've been happy to partner with the League of Women Voters this year. So we also are happy to celebrate with our foundation. On the upper left, you see some familiar faces. The foundation had a couple of events this year to create deeper relationships with our many donors. This year, the foundation increased outreach to donors, sponsored 2 events, and doubled the number of donors. And the foundation raised over $65,000 last year for the library. On the bottom right, just below that, you can see that the library, your library, sponsored a celebration event because the library is 145 years old last year. So thank you to our entire community for providing public libraries in this community for 145 years. Thank you to the mayor for being such a strong promoter of summer reading and literacy and collaboration in our community. Mayor Marlin sponsored a summer reading challenge, and people read more than she had recommended and challenged us to read. So thank you for putting the challenge out there and for getting right in and celebrating with us. And you can see we had these like thermometers on our big bulletin board. So as people went by, they could see how they were doing and how the community did. And again, we blew it off the charts. There's a little shopping cart in the middle that's indicative that the Friends of the Urbana Free Library started their own Amazon store. And so using volunteer help, they've posted books, and they're making between $800 to $1,200 a month, which is a new revenue stream, which, as we know, is important. It's always important, but it's even more important now. On the bottom towards the right, we have a picture of me with our architect, and the contractors that worked on the renovation of the 100-year-old porch, which had fallen into disrepair. There was a hole in it. And so we worked with these companies and fixed the porch, and then PACA gave us the Heritage Award for the restoration. And the renovation was funded by the Urbana Free Library Foundation. Again, very grateful to our community support. And on the bottom right, we get our indicator of where it's COVID time. That's me driving our 3D printer over to a partner at their house for the University of Illinois. They are borrowing the 3D printer to print PPE. We also loaned out a sewing machine or two so that people can make masks. So as COVID hit our community, we try to support in different ways. What we wanted to do, of course, is support our community. So we started an e-card. If you couldn't come into the library to get a physical card, you could apply online and you could get your library card to use all our online resources, e-books, e-videos, e-audiobooks, which are super popular. And then when the library reopened, you could convert that card into a physical card and be able to check out books, DVDs, telescopes, and such. We started a curbside pickup service while the building was closed so that we could deliver items on hold to people, whether they biked up or drove up. That was very popular, and we continue that service now. We want people to feel comfortable using the library in the way that makes the most sense for them, and it's a convenience in many ways. On the upper right, we have books and more bundles. This builds off of the teacher holds. You can call us and say, I want these kinds of items. I want books about dogs or buried treasures or vampires. We'll pull together a list of materials for you, check it out to you, put it in a bag, and then if you want to, you can drive up curbside and we'll deliver it out to your car. Even though the library was closed, we hosted the primaries on March 17th. So we were able to use the auditorium and the bathrooms and keep the rest of the library off limits and create a safe voting experience for people. We are looking forward to being an election site come this fall, and also are looking forward to partnering with the clerk's office so that we can be a site for a ballot drop box. We started a seed lending library that launched while we were closed for COVID, and we relaunched our home delivery service so that people that couldn't drive up for pickup could receive library materials as well. So also while we were closed, we took our programming online. You saw all the pictures of people getting together in person, which is not what we could do a little earlier this year. So we've got online story times. We kicked off summer reading with a concert that we got a grant for through the state of Illinois. We started an online book club, chess club went online, Teen Open Lab went online. Kids are able to pick up craft supplies at the library so they can then participate and learn new skills at home via Zoom. People who were working at home were proud of the work they were doing, so we did show and tell of their own individual projects. And then we partnered with the SBDC to talk about starting your own business. This is an opportune time for some people to start their own business, whether they had always wanted to or whether they lost their jobs, and this is the opportunity to start something new. Write On is a story writing support that we provide, and so we're doing that online as well. And we're partnering with the local musicians to have concerts live elsewhere, filmed, and then Facebook Live, so we can make that available to our community. Drag Queen Story Hour, which is always super popular, went online. And then we've got online story times for the little kids as well as the slightly older kids online as well. We are very happy with the ability that people have to participate with these. We are getting good attendance. We also know that not everyone has the technology. We do have about 20 hotspots that we check out to people, and we do have Wi-Fi around the building, and we see people sitting on the porch and around the library using the Wi-Fi. So we will continue to look for ways to make ourselves accessible, knowing that there are barriers in our community for people to get online. We are open for grab and go service. We were closed for a couple months, opened back up on June 26th. So we want to be safe. We ask people wear a mask and follow social distancing measures. We have a 1 hour limit per day in the building so that we can have good turnover in the building, again, create a safe environment. We're following room capacities in partnership with the governments, the state government, and working with the CUPHD. We had a big year in local history and genealogy. We launched digital exhibits, which is funded by the Friends of the Urbana Free Library, the mechanism for that, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that on the next slide. We are documenting racial justice in Champaign County, so we're reaching out to the community to say, as you participate in different events, please send us your writings, your pictures. We want to collect this information so we can share it back with the community and show what we were doing at this time and place. Also, we have archives at home. So as people are writing about COVID and their COVID experiences, we would like to hear from you and collect, again, what you have to share so that we can make it available. The Community Webs Project is something that we got a grant for a few years back. We're trolling the internet for community websites of different community organizations, whether it's the City of Urbana's website, eBlackCU, or Pygmalion Festival. We're capturing what's on the web about this time and place for these different organizations, and then they're searchable later so we can back and see our online history as well as our paper history. On the left, you see some things from the News Gazette. I am absolutely delighted that the News Gazette selected the Champaign County Historical Archives to be the new home of their archival holdings. You know that the News Gazette moved out of their building in downtown Champaign and moved a little bit to the west and south. So working with our community partners, the Champaign County History Museum, the U of I Archives, and the U of I History, Philosophy, and Newspaper Library, we talked with the News Gazette, visited their archives, and determined which parts of the collection made sense to live at the Champaign County Historical Archives versus the museum and on campus. Great partners to work with. It was, what we received at the Urbana Free Library was over 1,000 cubic feet of materials. The move took 11 hours. It was a lot of stuff. We filled a semi. The collection is so big we could not put it in the Tepper building next door in the main library here. We're renting space at Lincoln Square Mall because there is no space here. Over 40 file cabinets of subject and name files have clippings, photos, negatives, and records that are alphabetized and indexed. And so you can see in the little pictures there, there's also microfilm. There's over 350 boxes of subject clippings in addition to the 40 file cabinets, and then 35 bound volumes of county newspapers. So why is this a big deal? In addition to having the physical stuff, we also have the right to digitize all of it and make it available online to the world. We'll digitize it and OCR it so that people can search for the words in the newspaper articles. A good portion of the collection we received is not available online in the online News Gazette. And so this is the one way that people will be able to access this material. This is very exciting for us to make it available to our community and to the world. So back to more general library things, you like to hear what's happening at the library. As of a week ago, 28,300 items worth over $555,000 were checked out. Almost 29,000 of those items were ebooks. I'm sorry, of the 28,300 items, 1,800 are ebooks and downloadable audiobooks. We don't have a price for those, but if you figure $20 a title, that's another $37,000 worth of value that is checked out right now for our community. If we look at the number of card holders, obviously our stats for the year overall are down given that we were closed for a number of months. The building was closed, and so people couldn't check out as many items as they normally would or ask as many reference questions as they normally would. But the number of card holders went up by 700 card holders for the year. So we're very proud that that work with the e-cards really paid off and that people are using the library. Also, we see a big trend in downloadables, as you can imagine. It was going up anyways this year over last year, but looking at this, you can see that it is significantly up. It's up by over 10,000 items or checkouts. Overall, if you compare February 19 to February 20, which is February, March is when things started tanking as far as people coming in the library, us being closed. Circulation of items was up by almost 2,800 items, February to February. During that time, people really increased their number of hours on the computers. So the computer use hours were up by 5,400 hours. And then staff notarized 150 more documents, and volunteer hours, we're super happy with this. Volunteer hours were up by 337 hours, again, through February 19 versus February 20. So where are we going next? Looking at the strategic plan, we've got this beautiful chart that puts everything on one page. We're going to implement the strategic planning as we've been. Activity planning, what are the specifics that we're going to do to accomplish these goals? We're doing this in the departmental level into September. main takeaways are being flexible and serving our community, especially in these uncertain times. Funding is always a concern. We are grateful for and need your continued support. Your colleagues at the city are amazing. We couldn't do what we do without you. I know I say this every time I talk to you, but it's true every single time. And we appreciate our strong relationships with the city. Before fiscal 20 was even done, we heard the sad news that we can anticipate that personal property replacement tax was going to be $40,000 less than what we had budgeted. So we made that cut before we even started this fiscal year. We had a couple of library interns that were graduating, so we cut those positions from our service desks. Right now, we're not as busy as we once were in the same way, but at some point, hopefully soon, sooner than later, we hope to be as busy as we were before, if not busier. So we will see how this impacts us. But for right now, no staff have been laid off to make these cuts. Staff were paid the entire time the library was closed. Staff had professional development opportunities, special projects, and regular library work like planning programs, ordering books, and things like that. So we are pleased that we were able to serve our community as well as we did, and I think very well during the closure. Please continue, this is my ask to you, please continue to share library resources with your constituents and encourage them to get library cards. I would love to have double the number of people we have on home delivery, triple. We have got volunteers who want to help, and we have materials that people would like to check out. We want to make sure they get out into the community. We want to make it easy to get and to use your library. We will come to you to sign people up. Please let us know how we can be part of your lives. So that is a very quick, speedy year in review.
Thank you so much, Celeste. Certainly you're showing how resilient the library has been during this COVID-19 pandemic, and all the services that you provide are pretty impressive. I wanted to ask before we open it up to some other comments maybe that other city council members have. I found it really interesting that you indicated that audiobooks have become very popular. Is that is that typical for this summer reading, or want to make a comment on that?
Yeah, thanks for asking. Audiobooks, people really like them because they can download them to their phone, and you can listen to audiobooks while you're doing other things, working out, doing the dishes. So people like the flexibility of being able to listen while you're doing other things.
Mm-hmm. The other big news is the News Gazette archives coming to you. Certainly a huge array of materials. And as a person who's curious about the history of the community, I'm looking forward to the ability someday to scour those online. It looks like it's going to take some effort to do that, to digitalize the records. Do you have kind of a blueprint for what you're going to do with that?
We normally have 2 interns working on the Chanute collection, which we are still processing and making available, with not hiring interns with not filling those intern positions. We are short a little bit. The foundation actually funds an intern position 10 hours a week. So what we're going to do is let things get a little bit more stable with the U of I as well, with how they're doing classes. Hire an intern in January. We're processing the collection to physically put it on shelves, put up shelving units, make it accessible, and then we can get it into a position where we can have a better idea of what all we have and what we can make available quickly and where we can use volunteer help so that we can scan items. So they're just file cabinet upon file cabinet with drawers of hundreds, thousands of tiny envelopes. And each envelope is labeled with either a person name or a category. And these clippings, literally clippings from the paper, have been cut out and stuffed into the tiny envelopes. And it's our goal to scan those and OCR them so that you've got the words and the picture in the article and put them online so you can look at them in all those different ways. But this is like a career. This is something you can do for your career. This collection is immense.
Right.
So if you would like a tour of the facility, I would be happy to have you get one. We're still putting up shelves and moving stuff around, but it's pretty cool to see. So please reach out to me and let me know.
Very, very interesting. Are the files as they are in their physical state so many envelopes. They seem to be well organized. Are they
Yeah.
researchable even before you do the scanning? Are you going to let people research?
Well, currently we do, so yes, we just need a little bit of time to get our ducks in a row. So what we do with other collections that are in our Tepper building just to the west of the library is patrons make a request and then we run next door and get the files and bring them back over, and then they can look at them in the archives. The archives is on an appointment only system, an hour a day. And so when we get this a little more organized, and it's in great shape from Carolyn Vance, who was the librarian at the News Gazette for years and years and years, fabulous, fabulous work. So we just need a little bit of time to make sure we see where everything is. And then you will be able to say, I would like Sharice's dad, for example. Is there a file on Sharice's dad as an alderperson? Is there a file on, you know, pick a name or pick a topic, and we would pull it for you, and then you could look through them. We just have to make sure we know what all we have a little bit better first.
Okay, great. Thanks so much. Does anybody else on council have a comment or question at this time? Okay, I see Bill and then Mary Alice. Bill?
Okay, well, sticking with the newspaper theme, I think they call that newspaper morgue, if I remember right, where you have like a bunch of envelopes itemized by subject. When you're coordinating with the History, Philosophy, and Newspaper Library, and I think they did a lot of digitization of the Courier, but they stopped at some year, I think in the 30s at some point. So it'd be nice to fill in the gaps before you do, if you're going to be doing the digitization of the full edition rather than just the morgue contents. It'd be nice to fill in those gaps like from 35 on, or I think the DI even covers some of that. You can get digital DI up to about 75 or 76. But there's definitely a lot of gaps in the 70s and 80s that I could never find online. So it'd be nice if you kind of prioritize stuff to fill in some of those decades where we don't have anything right now. And I know all that's available on microfilm, but it's just a lot harder, and you can't do the OCR searching and everything by microfilm. So I think that's awesome, and I like that we have, I really like all the programming you're doing in the community, really reaching out and involving, working well with the school district. I saw you made a new agreement to continue that agreement with the school district. A lot of people don't realize that probably a third to half of the kids on the subsidized food program don't even live in the city. So it's nice to be able for them to have access to the library. And without that agreement, you wouldn't be able to do that. So I really appreciate all the work you're doing there, and look forward to everything you've been talking about, and getting back to going to the library on a regular basis.
Thank you, Bill. And if you could talk with me offline later about where the gaps are. We have the rights to digitize the clippings, so it depends what years the clippings are that match up with what people are looking for. And looking at other libraries that have received similar collections, this is not the first library morgue, or sorry, a newspaper morgue that's come to a library. So when I was at the Ann Arbor District Library, a similar circumstance happened. And so they've taken the approach that when they get a patron request, they'll look for those things and digitize those and fill in the gaps that way, as well as having a particular plan. So you can approach it in different ways. So we'd like to hear about the gaps you see. Thank you.
Okay, so just to clarify, so you won't have the permission to digitize the full edition of the newspaper, just the clippings part?
There's a lot of pieces to it, and I'd be happy to talk with you more later.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thanks. And so Mary Alice.
Plus, I always enjoy this presentation because I always learn something. So thank you very much for all the creative stuff that you've done during this time. One area that I wanted to ask you about was there's a lot of concern about the digital divide and K through 12 schools. And so you talked a bit about a mobile hotspot and that you have 20 of those. Could you talk a little bit in terms of how that works, how long people can check it out for, and how available they are if they're usually already checked out?
They are usually already checked out. We do have a hold list. They check out, and I'm going to get this wrong, so I can follow up with you. I think it's 2 weeks, but I'm probably wrong, so let me not say that. And we actually just got a grant from UC2B, so did the Champaign Public Library, for $7,500 over 2 years so that we can get more hotspots, which are just about to hit the road. And we've actually purchased Chromebooks because we know some people don't have a computer or a hotspot, where some people have a phone, but they need more. Some people have different pieces of technology and we want to be responsive to that. So very shortly we'll be launching the UC2B hotspots, which will give us another few, 20, 15, sorry, I don't remember the exact number, but there will be more. And I will follow up with you when I have that.
So are you getting calls or inquiries in terms of how to get access to the internet from parents for their students?
I'm not hearing that we're getting those calls. We do have the computer lab open upstairs. We've got 10 computer stations. There are computers in the kids area as well. Like I say, we do limit to an hour to help prevent the spread of COVID, but people are welcome to come in during that time and use the library for that as well. And we do have, if you don't have a device, you can, you could check out a laptop and sit at one of the computer stations if you prefer a laptop.
And so I noticed that, as Bill had mentioned, you have the intergovernmental agreement with the school system that's been now renewed, so to speak. And I think one of the things that in the agreement is they're going to help distribute information about the library to the parents.
You two are so good. Thank you. You're selling it. I love it. So we expanded the agreement in 2 ways. We expanded the agreement so that all children qualify for the cards. Before it was just children that were out of district that qualified for the free or reduced lunch. And now it's all children and teachers and certified staff that work with the teachers in the, with the kids in the classroom. So like a speech pathologist in the classroom is a certified staff person. So when the library gave more, the school gave more as well. So on a monthly basis, the district's going to send an email newsletter that we create to all the parents that have emails online so that we can share more about what the library is doing.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay. Are there any other people who would like to make an inquiry right now? Charisse, please go ahead. Unmute yourself. Thank you.
No, I just wanted to say it's been a pleasure to be on the trustees.
You might be locked up. Am I locked?
Been a pleasure to be on the board of trustees and involved in all of these things. I don't have a lot of questions because, of course, I kind of go through this every month with a meeting. But Celeste is doing an excellent job. Keeping just even the ideas that she just comes up with, the curbside service and stuff like that that have helped to serve the community, and keep it up. I think it's a great, I think you do a great job, Celeste.
Charisse, thank you so much. You know, the staff here are amazing and they're so creative and bring forward all these great ideas. It's fun to say yes all day long, mostly.
Oh, the one thing that I wanted to ask you though too, if when they do their curbside service and check people out, they still ask people, have you done your census yet?
I'll double check on that. Thank you.
Okay.
Good point. Okay, anybody else?
I think Julie might have had a question, but I think she was having some technical problems, so she'll probably be back on.
Oh, Julie. All right. So let's see if she's available.
It looks like she had to disconnect for a minute here. Let's see if she gets reconnected, but she's not currently on the call.
I see that. Yes. She just came back. All right, Julie, did you wish to speak to us and ask a question? Go ahead.
I apologize. For some reason, my Wi-Fi has knocked me out. So, and I don't need to take up a ton of time, but I am interested. I would be interested in learning a little bit and what it would take, what's required of somebody to be eligible for that, you know, so where I could go look for that, more information on that.
And what was the topic? What was the topic on what? Because you froze up for a second.
I think I'm going to have to, darn it.
I'm going to search and see how long Wi-Fi hotspots check out for. So I will discreetly Google on the side here on our webpage and get Mary Alice that answer. Okay, Wi-Fi hotspots check out for 2 weeks.
Okay, good. All right, so, and perhaps we'll get Julie back on here in a second. We'll give her a second.
I do want to say one more thing, Dennis.
Yes, okay, go ahead.
Because regarding the Wi-Fi checkouts too, you kind of almost have to get on a waiting list for those, don't you, Celeste? Because they are used a lot. And I know I had thought about checking one out when I was going to a family reunion and didn't want to have to use like a hotel their Wi-Fi. I wanted to have my own personal thing, and it was like a month that I would have had to have been on a list. So they're very popular.
All right. Well, we're not seeing Julie come back in yet. So hopefully we can answer her question in another way, except for I think we probably should go on to the next item. All right, so thanks so much, and we'll go on to the next presentation, I believe.
Thank you all.
All right. All right, which would be a presentation on the One Door program. Our Mayor, Diane Marlin, wanted to make a couple of words before we launch that.
I just wanted to tee this up for us. As you know, we're going to be redefining the role of policing and public safety in Urbana, and we'll be working on that for the next few years, as many cities around the country will be doing. And we're getting the framework into place for that now. But we do know, no matter what we do, one of the first things that'll form the foundation for this effort is to look at activities that police are responding to now, the calls for service and that sort of thing. And then ask ourselves in the short term, what are we asking our police to do and to respond to? Are there others who are better trained or better equipped to respond? And it ultimately goes to meet the needs of the community. And it may be that police remain the first responders for some calls. They may become co-responders. They may become the second responders, or in some cases, they may not respond to certain types of calls at all. But to this point, last week, the U.S. Conference of Mayors released a report on police reform and racial justice. And it's a very good report, and it's really a toolbox for cities to use. And I was on several panel meetings with them toward the end of the week, and it was interesting because one of the areas that was really highlighted by a number of mayors and by the report was the area that we're going to be talking about tonight. The U.S. Conference of Mayors really recommended that cities could get a really good start on this effort by rethinking the model that they're using for responding to calls for help related to that intersect with mental health issues. And they basically recommended that cities explore pilot alternative response models that include behavioral health professionals. And the other thing they pointed out, and took a lot of pains to point out, is that ultimately this could cost cities more. So it's not a way to necessarily save money, but it's a way to better serve the public. And they just wanted people to go in with their eyes wide open. So luckily for the city of Urbana, our Lieutenant Sanders in our police department has been working with community partners for the last at least 2 years. It might have been longer than that. To develop just such a model program that is very close to, close to being able to pilot in our community. He's been working with representatives from Carle Hospital, from Rosecrans, Central Illinois, and See You at Home. And that's, they've called this program One Door, and that's what they're here to describe tonight. it'll be an overview, and I think it's an exciting proposal. So take it away, Joel.
And we do recognize that Julie Lott has come back to us by telephone. So, thanks, Joel. Please do proceed.
Okay. Good evening, Mayor Marlin, City Council. Thank you very much for the opportunity to give this quick, what will seem like a brief, but might take a little bit longer than brief presentation on the One Door. One Door offers a new approach to our community, how it responds to individuals in crisis, and require a paradigm shift away from traditional accepted roles and responsibilities. A summary of the project is simple. The One Door facility is convenient care for individuals in crisis. The project will offer a co-responder model, partnering trained crisis workers with the police and the case management follow-up system that will reduce future police involvement. Conception, creation, and implementation of One Door is the antithesis of simple. The current attempt to open the door has been difficult, complex, confusing, and at times frustrating over the last 18 months. You heard me say current attempt because since 2013, government leaders, private corporations, not-for-profits have researched different models, hosted meetings, proposed various iterations for One Door, and still One Door remained little more than an idea. Many perspectives, explanations, opinions, disagreements, and deeply held values exist to explain why the implementation has not happened until now. Once One Door is open, we will provide the police and the community a diversion from the emergency room and jail, new dispositional options and community solutions, case management and follow-up, education and understanding, and advocacy for those with no voice. This evening, I'll provide a quick overview of the One Door and then permit questions. Present on this call and available for questions at the end of the presentation are Rob Dahlhaus, Executive Director of See You at Home, Joey King, CEO, Rosecrans Central Illinois, and Heather Hens with Carl Behavioral Health. And my slide doesn't want to, there we go. In 2012, I invited every mental health provider, stakeholder, and law enforcement official I could find to sit down and discuss law enforcement's lack of resources and to try and identify solutions. Attendees agreed law enforcement essentially only had three practical dispositions available: jail, hospital, or to resolve the situation at the scene, which is just a resolution, not a long-term solution. We continue to meet and are now the Champaign County Crisis Intervention Team Steering Committee, or CITSC. Thanks to the CITSC, over the last 8 years, the relationships between law enforcement, providers, and stakeholders has grown exponentially. We understand each other's needs, we have overcome conflicting goals, and providers have created some programming that is beneficial to the consumer and the officer in the field. Local law enforcement has altered tactics and has become better at recognizing and understanding how to address the needs of the individual in crisis. Still, we only have three dispositional options that are available 24/7, 365. Those remain the jail, the hospital, or on-scene resolution. We have spent many hours discussing how to improve the flow of information from police to providers. We've made several attempts to create the process. Still, real-time communication remains difficult, and law enforcement is still a primary means of introduction into the mental health system. Meeting the needs of the most vulnerable, providing the necessary resources, creating practical response protocols requires navigating complicated relationships, oppressive regulations, and extremely difficult financial hurdles. The current system is very linear. The model provides quality service to the vulnerable population who are stable, at risk, or volatile. We'll look at what these mean here in just a second. The system provides little in-the-moment care to those who are the most vulnerable, and it does not offer an effective means for real-time exchange of information. When we talk about vulnerable, there's two tiers. Tier 2 are the individuals at the top of the, if you picture a V, these individuals at the top, and at the top they're stable. As the individual moves down the V, the individual becomes or begins to show signs of instability and at risk of needing assistance. The individual situation may become volatile, requiring timely action, and the current system is able to meet these needs. When the individual drops below the faded line, complete collapse is imminent and immediate action is required. A response at 3 o'clock in the morning, an interaction at noon on Sunday, a need to stabilize an individual that can't wait till the individual's next scheduled appointment. The current system is not designed to meet these needs. One door will exist for these folks. Allow me to share a few examples of who will receive the attention as we walk through the door. The individual who, and these are real life situations where we had individuals who, a husband and wife, who are having verbal domestics. They were new to police contact, although they were an older couple. My officers, on about the 5th or 6th time we responded to these individuals, finally asked the question, why are we coming here so often? Why are we not getting along? And the female says, because the husband won't close the closet door. And why did that matter? Because the closet door is from where the demons came. This young lady or older lady was in a state of psychosis. She was having hallucinations and delusions on what was going on around her. Once we learned that, we were able to call then Community Elements, now Rosecrans. A crisis worker was able to reach out, and we were able to get it so that this individual received the services she needed, and we never responded to the residents again. But the system isn't, we have to be able to identify those individuals much quicker. We also have an example of a local medical facility where an individual had received medical treatment on an inpatient basis, but was no longer needing medical treatment and free to go home. This individual lived about 2 hours away and was in a state of psychosis. She refused to leave the bedroom or the hospital room until her husband came to get her. The problem is she didn't have a husband. It was something, a delusion, a hallucination in her mind. So since she was refusing to leave, the police get called to remove her. Well, this is a technical criminal trespass to property. She's been asked to leave private property. She's refusing to leave. There's nobody I know of that would think this individual needs to get arrested. But what do you do with this individual? We don't want to take her to jail. There's nobody local that we can call to come and get her. There's nothing we can do. Luckily, she made a few statements and took a few actions that gave us some other options. But more often than not, we're not going to have a solution for this individual. We also have the individuals we deal with on a regular basis. We have the individual who goes into our local convenience store and eats a hot dog and drinks a soda without paying for it. And when the police ask, why are you doing this? The individual says, what's the problem? I own the store. The individual's in a state of, is delusional. The individual really believes he owns the store. So do you really want to take this person to jail? No. Well, what are you going to do with the individual? If we don't take them to jail, they don't meet the criteria for hospitalization, what do you do? I can go on for hours telling stories about the young lady with schizophrenia who's been without a home for years. Although the system knows her and made efforts to help her, I often wonder if someone who had been dedicated to continual follow-up, could she have received treatment and become more of a functional member of our society? Or the young man who has traumatic brain injury who will never function very well on his own. We've, as a police community, we've either arrested custodially or given a notice to appear well over 100 times this individual for typically minor and victimless crimes. He's never going to learn the rules because of his injury. Yet when a local coffee shop calls because the individual is in the coffee shop and he's been trespassed, where are the police supposed to take this individual? We can send him on his way, but he's just going to come back. Currently, Tuesday through Friday, noon through 5, we can take him to the Phoenix. They're very receptive of the individual. But that's only Tuesday through Friday, noon through 5. One Door will welcome these individuals, work to identify specific needs, and strive to connect the human with the resource that can make a difference. Just putting a little bit of perspective, these are countywide numbers of what we are dealing with in law enforcement on a yearly basis. I will caution you that these numbers are underreported. So the way we get the data is every time a police officer in Champaign County deals with somebody in crisis or somebody who's demonstrating signs and symptoms of crisis, the officer is supposed to fill out what we call a CIT form. So if I deal with Johnny at one time at Schnucks, and then I deal with him again in Lincoln Square Mall, and a third time at the library, I should have 3 CIT forms. Realistically, I probably only get 1 CIT form. If somebody is what we refer to as a super utilizer, where we're dealing with them on a daily basis, I might not even get that reported. So as you look at these numbers, recognize that the issue is significantly larger than just what we're looking at. As we implement One Door, I would actually expect these numbers to go up a little bit, only because we'll start doing better data collection, and we'll start getting a better picture of what we're dealing with. I would expect the petitions, which is the police taking somebody to the hospital involuntarily because they're a risk of harm to self or others. I would expect those to start dropping because of the crisis response team. I anticipate it'll take about 2 years before the data begins a downward trend. The mission of the One Door is a single open door solution offering opportunity to recognize, be recognized, evaluated, stabilized, engaged, and treated with dignity and respect. This is going to be a facility that provides services to members of our community involved in an active crisis and as a resource for the most vulnerable citizens. This will be, while it's designed for the police, while the police are kind of pushing this along, in the ideal world, eventually, as the police have fewer and fewer contacts, one of the reasons will be because community members are taking advantage of the One Door themselves. So if I'm sitting at home and my loved one is in crisis, instead of calling the police, which is what people do today, I will reach out to the One Door and take my loved one to the One Door where the individual can get services. It enhances but does not replace current resources. And it strengthens collaboration between community stakeholders, service providers, and law enforcement agencies. This has taken so long to put together because we have to have trusted relationships and quality partnerships, and everybody needs to get onto the same page and get beyond their own needs and start developing the needs for the individuals beyond what we deal with ourselves. Our goals: a diversion, alternative to arrest in the emergency room. If you go back to the statistics slide, you'll see that we actually only take to jail reported about 5 to 8% of the individuals we actually deal with who are in crisis. That number can come down. It gives options and solutions for dealing with individuals in crisis who do not meet the criteria for arrest or involuntary admission. It provides case management, which permits a proactive approach to address communities' most vulnerable consumers. It provides education primarily between law enforcement and the stakeholders and providers and consumers. And it'll be a voice for those who currently don't have a voice. What's on the other side of the door? First, there'll be the crisis response team. We've asked Rosecrans, as they're putting this together, to be able to get a crisis team member on a police scene 30 minutes or less. It doesn't do the officer, it doesn't do the consumer any good if it's taking a couple hours, an hour, 2 hours to get a crisis response team member onto that officer's scene. So we want the crisis team member to be there within 30 minutes. They'll get dispatched one of 2 ways. Somebody calls in a Johnny standing in the corner of Main and Vine howling at the moon. That's an obvious crisis call, METCAD will dispatch the police and the crisis response team member simultaneously. The other would be the officer gets on a scene of an incident, realizes the officer is dealing with somebody in a crisis, and the officer can then call for and ask the crisis response team member respond to that scene. That will provide on-scene assessment. You go back to our petitions. We've had well over 700, countywide 700 petitions a year going to our hospitals. I would anticipate that number coming significantly down, as the same team members who are doing the assessment at the hospital can now do the assessment within the confines of the individual's home. And if it's appropriate to come up with a plan where the individual can stay at home, that's what will be done. There will also be the contact and review and follow-up. So if you follow CIT, crisis intervention team models throughout the nation and internationally, police officers do that follow-up. In our model, crisis team members are going to do that follow-up. The police are going to do police work. The crisis team is going to do crisis work. And it's going to reduce our contact. And it's going to continue to put people who are trained more specifically in how to engage somebody back with that person. We'll have a stabilization facility. So somebody who doesn't, somebody who's in crisis and needs to be stabilized before the individual can get a complete assessment, there'll be what's called a living room model. There'll be a living room there where the individual can sit and be fairly stimulus free and can get stabilized before they're engaged further. The crisis residential model is housed at 70 East Washington currently. It will remain there. That is a residential service for individuals who have need residential treatment for up to 2 weeks to get stabilized and get back on their feet. The Phoenix See You at Home will offer and open the door through the time at the Phoenix and through the other ways that will be engaging individuals, peer support, wraparound services, individuals who have been engaged with Rosecrance in the past or other treatment facilities in the past, we can get them re-engaged. People who've never had introduction into services can get introduced into services. We'll be able to take individuals who need housing and need employment services and be able to guide the individuals to the programs that offer that. This is not going to be a program. It'll be a hub to push and to guide and to escort people into those programs. As we already have, and this is one thing that in 2013 when we started these discussions we didn't have. In fact, when I started this 18 months ago, we didn't have 365 shelters. We're moving to that now, but this will require 365-day shelters. We've gone through this pretty quick because we get to this part of it. And this is where everybody says, oh, this is a really cool idea. I can't wait till it happens. So the capital end of this to get this thing going. See You at Home is going to own it. And their partners, Rosecrance and Carl, will come alongside and help provide some services, but the money will flow through See You at Home. See You at Home just purchased what most people on this call will understand is the Time Center, 70 East Washington. They still owe $720,000 on that building. We're not asking anybody who wants to pay that debt down. See You at Home will take that money. Just keep in mind, every dollar See You at Home spends on that building is money that will not be spent on services. To get See You at Home, to get 70 East Washington in a position that can house this, it's going to take between $500,000 and $800,000 of renovations. The reason that spans so wide is because the state of Illinois, if you look at their budget, has dedicated $300,000 to renovations for the 70 East Washington, but that money's not been given to See at Home yet. So if that money doesn't come through, it's going to be around an $800,000 cost to renovate 70 East Washington. An architect has drawn up the plans. The One Door team is in the near future going to be going through those plans tweaking them and getting them ready to bid out to a contractor to get an exact cost for that capital budget. The one door could, and Rob, when he gets on the live here later, may correct me on this. I think we probably could find some way to launch one door without that capital improvement, but it would not be sustainable, and it's still something that would have to be done in 2021. It couldn't survive without getting those renovations done. It's going to take some training from several different directions. The team that's written this up believes it's going to be about $55,000. I left a zero off of there as I look at this, but that should be $55,000 in training costs to get this thing, to get the crisis response team up, and some training that See at Home's going to have to do with additional staff members. Recurring program budget. So again, I mentioned See at Home's going to own this. Their current budget with the shelters is about $915,000 a year. They're going to have to add to that. The three partners and the community is going to have to come up with $1.292 million in money that we currently have not identified. So the new financial commitment required year one will be between 1.847 million and 2.147 million. If you do the math, that's the difference between the $500,000 and $800,000 on the build out. For 2 years and beyond, it's going to require, on top of the $915,000 that See at Home is committed to raising, it will be beyond that. It's going to be $1.292 million for a total, as we go year two and beyond, a little over $2 million a year to run this facility. I've gone really fast through this. I'll throw up here real quick several questions as I've presented this in the past, questions that pop up to me. I'll let you read through those for just a second, and then we'll open the door to questions. And I'll give Joey, Heather, and Rob time to make sure they're on and ready to go. So Dennis, as we go through this, if you want to open the floor up to questions.
Right, okay, so Joel, do you want to receive questions right now and then have Joey and the other members chip in on, make comments after these questions have been answered?
If somebody's got whoever they've got a question for, so if they got questions specific for Carl, just ask for Heather.
This is among the council members. So, okay, anybody who wants to raise their hand. I see Bill Goldbrook. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, Joel, you just recited the numbers, the costs going forward. Is that estimated just Urbana's cost, or is that a cost that will be shared by other agencies in Champaign or Champaign County?
Good question. That is cost for the entire program. So it will be a countywide program. The crisis response team will respond to police calls throughout the county. Anybody in the county can take their loved one to the one door. So that is a number countywide. That is to run the program up and running full steam would be the $2+ million a year.
Has there been any discussion of how that slice of the pie would be divvied up? And just as a follow-up, we just mentioned Champaign County. Are these services going to be offered to anybody outside of Champaign County?
The answer to the first question has been discussion how they're going to be divvied up. No. See at Home, like I said, their budget covers the first $915,000 of that. But beyond that, the crisis response team and some other internal needs that are going to be there, it's going to require some form of a physician or psychiatrist will need to be part of this at some point. How those funds are getting pushed around, a lot of it, I envision it's going to require government funds. It's going to need the cities and the county is going to have to put funds into this. It's going to require private funds. Carl is in discussion right now exactly what level they're going to participate. But Carl will participate in this. I would imagine once we're up and running, I could see OSF getting participation into this and others who, if they want to use the services as far as a corporation, will need to participate somewhat in it. And it's going to take the community itself. It's going to take the private donors. Part of that is the $900 and some odd thousand that CUNOM currently uses. All of that is citizen donated money. So it's going to take the community as a whole, whether government, whether private corporation, or whether private individuals. All of us are going to have to come together if we want to change how the police respond to individuals in crisis. If we want to take the police out of the primary role of providing these services, the community is going to have to step up and deal with this. The second question was, will it be open to individuals outside of the county? The one door, 70 East Washington, whoever knocks on that door is going to get an answer. And it's going to be, you go inside and is going to get an assessment and is going to get escorted to the most appropriate facility that the assessment gives. The crisis response team will only be available to law enforcement within Champaign County.
Thanks.
Okay, very good. Okay, Bill Brown, and then Mary Alice.
Yeah, thanks. The way I understand it, this is a location where the police would be taking them after an assessment. So is this considered an involuntary commitment, similar to when they take someone to the hospital, or would this be something that is voluntary, or potentially both, or how's that work?
Potentially both. So the individual, outside of community members escorting somebody there, police involvement, you'll get there one of three ways, or one of two ways, I guess. One is the crisis response team has responded out to the field. They've done an assessment and they've decided that the individual needs some more assessment or needs more treatment this evening. And so they'll ask the officer to transport that person to the facility. If that person is not a risk of harm to self or others at the time of that assessment, that transportation will be 100% voluntary. If the person chooses not to go, the person will not go. The example I used earlier is of the person howling at the moon. If that person isn't a risk of harm to others, but we can communicate well enough with the individual to offer them a ride over there, that would be voluntary. The individual who I talked about with the traumatic brain injury, that individual would be given options to go over there. We wouldn't custodially arrest somebody and then try to house them there. It will not be a locked facility. But during that assessment period, the clinician may deem that the individual is a risk of harm to self or others, and that individual would be taken there on an involuntary basis. And that's where the doctors and psychiatrists have to come into play there at some level. The other way the law enforcement will end up there is, while crisis response team is a very needed addition to our response in Champaign County, they're not going to be able to get somebody to every single one of our calls. And so officers are still going to have the skills and the ability to do an assessment to decide where the individual needs to go. The officer will still take some people there on an involuntary basis, on a voluntary basis.
Okay, and then just one more for now. I know that I've kind of been watching the media reports and stuff, and I know there's a big increase in domestics, and there's always been quite a few domestics. And at some level, you know, a lot of times there's no physical contact, and the police don't arrest somebody. You know, it just says there was a verbal argument and they were called. So a lot of those are probably, you know, require behavioral intervention, but you know, they aren't necessarily delusional, might not need medication or anything like that. Would those kind of instances qualify for an officer to, you know, ask if they want to be taken to the one door, or other ways to arrange intervention services?
Sure. So yes, one of the things we train our officers is to not diagnose. So the officer looks at a behavior that is consistent with somebody in a crisis. It might be caused by medical issues. It might be caused by mental health issues. It might be caused by substance use issues. The officer is not supposed to and should not make the decision on why this person's in crisis. So we go to the scene of the domestic. Again, a real life story. We go to the scene of a domestic where somebody is new to the law enforcement community because the mental health issue is new to the individual. The individual's done something that could be considered a crime, but the investigation shows that really this is due to the mental health issue. And so that person, now we have a resource that we can take the person to one door to get the individual introduced into services rather than taking the individual to jail. Does that address your question?
I think so. I'm still kind of thinking it through. Thanks.
Yeah, the concept, as I said early on, the concept of this is very simple. Take a crisis worker, put them with the police, and you guys go do this job. That is a very simple explanation. Starting into the weeds of this and how do you do that, and what kind of training do you need, and what policies do you set up, and who's going to be responsible for what, and who's going to fund what, and if I fund this and they're doing that, how do we move those funds around? The complexity of this is astronomical. And so, yes, I would imagine even after I'm done speaking tonight and questions are asked, more questions are going to pop up as people start to think about this and discuss this.
Great. All right, we had Mary Alice and then Cerise, and then I see Jared's also got a question.
Hi, Joel. So thank you for the presentation. I'm trying to kind of linearly walk through this process. So it sounds to me like if somebody calls 911 for a disturbance that's going on, then the police are automatically dispatched to the area, and then it's up to the police to understand whether or not this is something that Rosecrans should be called to. Can you just confirm that kind of order of operations?
That's one of two ways that Rosecrans, the crisis response team, would get notified, yes.
Okay, because I have seen some other in other places, Eugene, Oregon, Denver, that have taken a slightly different approach, which is rather than sending the police directly to a potential crisis scenario, there's an actual team on the road that is dispatched there first. So I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about how that decision was made.
Sure. So that's the ideal model. So currently we don't have crisis. Rosecrans has a wonderful crisis team. We work with them all on a regular basis. They are trained to have, when crises come to them, so they go to the hospital, they have individuals come into their office to do the assessment. Going to on scene to do an assessment is take some extra training, some extra skills. The ideal to this, so this is somewhat modeled after Peoria. If you go over to Peoria, they've got a similar model. And as they got it going, as my vision for this, as the crisis team gets more skilled and the community becomes more understanding of it, and in Peoria, the same crisis workers have done this for 20 years, so they know the people. And so my vision for this would be is eventually, yes, you get the call of somebody in crisis, a crisis team would get that call and the police might not even know that the call went out. The example when I toured Peoria's facility they used was that Johnny's outside mowing the lawn in the nude again. So the crisis team knows Johnny, and so the crisis team just goes and deals with Johnny. The police never know that call went out. But that's 2.0. We need to start with getting the crisis team knowing and comfortable with what their skill level is and enhancing their skill level. And we've got to get the police comfortable being able to turn this call over. Again, this goes back to one of my first statements of this is a paradigm shift, and we can't make that shift overnight. And so it's going to take some work. One of the things I didn't mention as we went through this is we're going to pilot the team in Urbana only for probably the first 6 months to start understanding what do we need, what skills are there, what skills aren't there. Can we do this with a 10-person team? Do we need more? Is 10 people going to be too many? We're going to look through that. What does it, and start looking at what does it look like to just dispatch a crisis worker to these calls? And so eventually, yes, we'll get there, but we're not going to get there on day one. And the other caution I would give, and I understand the context in which we're talking about mental health, but when the call comes in of a disturbance without knowing more information, yes, the police are going to go to that. But that's why I used the example of Johnny standing at the corner howling at the moon. That's an obvious mental health. So that would be one that the crisis team, we would hope, in time would handle on their own, and the police wouldn't have to be involved in. But just a disturbance, somebody's yelling and screaming outside, you don't know what that is yet. And so even if it appears to be mental health, you're still going to have the police respond until we know it's mental health. And once we know it's mental health, then we're going to get the crisis team member on scene and switch roles. The police will be there to support that crisis person. But what I don't want to happen is we're assuming it's mental health. We're diagnosing it, and I don't want to diagnose it. Is that fair enough?
Yeah, that's fair enough. So basically what I'm hearing you say is this is kind of a jump start to a larger idea in terms of how to handle mental health issues in our community. This is just step one. And as you said, step two, or the ultimate goal, is to get further beyond that. Right.
I didn't want to get too deep in the weeds tonight.
Sure.
Pull it out. Another step for One Door 2.0 is, if you look at, I'm trying to remember now, Tucson maybe, I'm not sure which one. They have embedded crisis workers, master level crisis workers, in their 911 center. And when somebody calls in a crisis, about 80% of their calls aren't even getting dispatched to anybody. They're getting handled by a crisis worker on 911. That's 2.0. We're not there yet. Let's get this moving where a crisis team and the police are working well together. And then once we get that system down, we can start disbanding this and shifting whose roles where and pulling them apart. But we can't do that on day one.
Okay. All right. And so you mentioned Peoria as one place to look and see how their program is run.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I'll definitely take a look at that. I have several other questions, but I want to give other people an opportunity to ask theirs, and maybe they have the same questions.
That's generous. Okay. So I think Sharice was the next person to ask. Raise her hand, and then we'll go to Jared.
Yes, I think I have just a couple of questions, actually. Will you be using also Cunningham Township as a resource? Because I know that Danielle has given us reports several times about, people who have have certain mental issues and stuff, and they seem to be servicing a lot of those people. So will that be, will One Door be working with or even taking over some of the caseload from Cunningham Township?
Let me come at two different directions. One is any stakeholder who wants to contribute financially to One Door is more than welcome to do that. And if Cunningham Township, we've talked to Danielle, I've sat in many meetings with her. I'm familiar with her roles and responsibilities. And if she wants to budget some money from the township into this, by all means, we'll take that money. We don't look to replace any current services. So if you picture, as I said earlier, this is like convenient care. So if you go to since Carl's a partner in this, I'll use Carl Convenient Care. I've got a cold or I don't know what's wrong with me. I go to Convenient Care. Somebody there does a run up on me and they say, you need to go see this specialist. You need to go see that specialist. You need to get this resource. So we're not going to be doing services as far as bringing people in and then treating them right there. We'll bring people in, we'll identify what treatment the individual needs, and that's very generic and very broad-based statement, but we're going to bring people in, give an assessment and say, hey, just tonight, all you really need tonight, all you're looking for is a place to rest your head. Just go over here to the shelter. Come in and you need stabilization. Maybe you need to go to crisis respite. come in and you go to the Phoenix, and now somebody at Phoenix is talking to you and realizing you need long-term care, outpatient, but long-term care. Now we're going to get you connected to Rosecrans. You need housing. We're going to get you connected to the Cunningham Township if that's where the most appropriate place to provide that service that you need. But we don't look to replace anybody's services. We've got great services in this community. Unfortunately, those who need it the most, those, as I described at the bottom of the V, those people, it's very difficult for them to get connected. And we're trying to connect them to those services.
Okay, another question, well, another couple of questions. Are you saying too, because you said this, One Door 2.0, would that include possibly, instead of someone calling 911 when there is a crisis, that eventually they might call a number like, 398 for specific crisis purposes to MetCAD, so that instead of the police being the first on the scene, that you actually, that person may even know that this is the number I need to call because I have this, that, and thus. Example I think of that comes right to mind is an older person with Alzheimer's that has wandered off. Mm-hmm. And you don't have any idea where they are, and a lot of times neither do they. They have a delusion of where they are. So are you eventually going to maybe even change even the MedCAD response so that there's a number that could be called for specifically for certain crisis situations?
The answer is both easy and difficult. So the short answer is sure. I love the idea. Mm-hmm. The goal would be to get police officers out of the mental health system, and police be the police and mental health workers be the mental health workers. And however we connect the mental health workers to those in crisis can be very creative.
So how do you deal with?
Well, here's the problem is you have this number. Where does that number go to, and who's on the other end of that number? And so while it's a great idea and there can be a solution to that, it's going to have to be resolved on the deciding, I dial 311, who answers that phone? Who's paying that person that answers that phone? Mm-hmm. And what skill level does that person need when they answer the phone? And so one of the reasons I mentioned earlier that we've had many iterations of this, and we've been working at this for 7-8 years now. And your ideas are wonderful. I like them. Mary Alice had good questions, and I like them. But one of the things we have to be careful of is trying to build a massive program on day one. Mm-hmm. And we've got to get this launched. We've got to see what the capabilities are. We've got to see how we do things without going into mission creep. We don't want to run anybody else out of business, but we want to be able to move it. So I like that idea of an alternate phone number when I'm at home and my loved one's in crisis. Who do I call? But then we've got to build that system for somebody to call.
Okay. And I think this question maybe is for Mr. Rosecrans. Exactly what kind of services would a person in crisis be capable of receiving when they are brought to your facility or brought to the facility?
So right now, especially during the pilot, we're going to be responding and consulting with Urbana PD and any call they make, whether it's in the community. Now, when they get to One Door, working with Rob so far in our pilot plans, we got a system with Rob's staff that are going to call us at the beginning of it on every single call. So the services will be crisis assessment, disposition, and then our long-term goal is how do we follow this person after all that? Because right now we have things in place that does the assessment, but it's then what? Who's going to continue to follow?
Okay. So would that mean, example, there was a gentleman that lived in his car in my neighborhood, and I got calls from people, you know, this guy is living in front of this house that he said he grew up in. And so, but the problem was that he was like really like living there, meaning there was human waste and everything else that had to be dealt with. And I know calling Danielle, she's like they were aware of this person, but there wasn't anything they could really do because he would not volunteer to come in and let them help him. So what's going to happen when you have those type of those situations? Are there any services that Rosecrans or CU home can do? CU at home can do?
That's a great example you gave, because that one's a very difficult example. But I think on that specific one, the mission is, at some point, I'm assuming that the PD would get involved.
Yeah, well, they would tell him to just move his car. That was like all they could do, is that you can't have your car parked here. And the only thing they really could do was to have him park on the other side of the street, I guess. And he would do that. He would alternate, you know.
So, Joe, if I can jump in here.
Go ahead, Joel.
This is a great example, and I know the situation you're talking about, Cherise. So what you get with One Door and a crisis response team is the only way you get this person out of his car and into services is voluntary. There's not a law that's going to force him. He's not a risk of harm to himself. He's not a risk of harm to others. And so the only way you're not going to get him to do something voluntary is to build a relationship with the individual. And the Urbana police, we've got several individuals throughout the community that my officers have relationships with. I mentioned earlier the young lady who has schizophrenia. Several of my officers have gotten her almost into a home. There's several resources in the community that have identified a place for her to stay if she would take it. She won't take it. But the only way you're going to get her there is to build that relationship. But it's difficult for the police to build that relationship because we're doing so many other things. Mm-hmm. It's not really our job. Rosecrans' team has wonderful, wonderful individuals who are skilled at building these relationships, but they've got other assignments. So his crisis team, and Joey can correct me, I think covers 4 counties. So by building a crisis team that is dedicated to law enforcement and dedicated to do this follow-up and dedicated to this case management, here's now a team that on their downtime, they can go to this individual and start building this relationship. And they can dedicate some time to this individual and give the opportunity for this individual to eventually take the steps forward that the individual needs. So instead of trying to fit him in somewhere to a process, we're altering the process so that the process is ready for that individual. Does that answer your question?
Yes, somewhat. Yes. Okay. I'm yielding the floor.
Okay, thank you then. And so our next person was, I think, Jared.
Thanks, Dennis. Well, you're certainly right, Joel. Bringing this up, of course, brings more questions than there are answers. I would just like to lead off by at least making the point that, like so many of these complex problems, we didn't receive this presentation prior or a memo or anything about this prior to having this meeting now. So we're going to get nowhere on this tonight, and it would have been great if we could have gotten something about this prior to the meeting. So that people could have brought their questions, because right now in my mind, we need to have a whole other meeting next week to talk about this now that we've heard about it, because I didn't even know what to expect coming into the meeting. And now I've got a gazillion questions to ask, and I'm sure, you know, the public are gonna have a gazillion to come at us too. So I don't know how many times I gotta say that when we have complex things, we've got to get people informed ahead of time. I'm not putting that on just you, Joel. That's a failure we've been having a problem with for a long time. All right, so first question. See You at Home owns this program. Am I to understand that that's how that goes?
Yes, when we started putting the partnership together, Carl and Rosecrans are very much wanting to participate. They're wanting to throw resources at this. They don't want to manage it. This fits very well within the scope of the role for See You at Home, and they are primed and in a position to best manage it. They're going to manage their end of it. So the additional, and I don't have the figure in front of me, like I said, it's big. The additional $1 million it takes over and above their budget, that will pass through them, but they're not necessarily going to manage it. So Rosecrans will manage the crisis response team. If they're not doing their job, they respond to Rosecrans. But if we the other options we had was forming another corporation, another 501c3, yet one more organization to add to an already top-heavy system, and nobody wanted to do that. And so we could then say, well, donate money here, donate money here, donate money here, and then you get one program that's got plenty of money and another program that's needed but doesn't have any money at all. So if we throw all the money into a pot and then disperse the money out, we can get everything paid for and everything moving forward.
Okay. I follow. So CRT will be responsible to Rosecrans.
Correct.
The in-house facility itself is going to be a See You at Home thing whenever that becomes alive.
Yes. And there'll be some Rosecrans people in there doing other things and some Carl people in there doing other things.
Okay, gotcha. Because there is going to be countywide involvement between multiple municipalities, et cetera, is there an IGA in the works between us, Champaign, the county, et cetera, about how any of this is going down?
So I hear your question. I don't know that there needs to be one. So Urbana Police will set its policy on how it's going to use the crisis response team or not use the crisis response team. The city of Champaign will decide how it's going to use the crisis response team. I would imagine we will all have very similar policies, but we're not setting policy for any agency or any city. Each city is going to select how their police department will use the resources. So One Door is a resource that is being offered to the community. The resource is asking for the community for some support, but it's a resource being offered. So I don't know why there would need to be any agreement between Urbana and See You at Home or any of the other partners.
I guess just in immediate response to that, I could see conflicts that happen. I'm sure you're right that similar policies will be adopted by each municipality. But if there were differences and different needs were needing to be met, and Champaign has a very high need that they've outlined in their policy, and it for whatever reason begins to supersede and take over calls, and Urbana is not able to use it as much because there is an agreement on how those policies are being played out between those two or the county, et cetera. I mean, just in my head, it seems like an IGA where everybody says, okay, well, this is how all law enforcement agencies are going to use this, makes more sense, but perhaps that's not the way it goes. One thing that is, I'm kind of curious about this process of One Door. It sounds like, this is the first, outside of Diane mentioning it, I know it's been like a thought people have had for a long time, but how much community input was there into the creation of this program, or was it just the heads of Rosecrans, See You at Home, the police, and the municipalities all getting together and deciding this was the best thing to do?
So I started having this conversation, like I said earlier, in probably 2013 when I toured Peoria's facility. I've had conversations with numerous people in the community since then. And I couldn't get into my files today for one reason or another. I'm going to guess about 18 months ago.
Checking up on you.
About 18 months ago, I put the first version of my presentation together, and I've been shopping this around to numerous different community groups for about the last 18 months, getting input from those who sit there and having conversations. If you sit with me in any setting, whether professional or social, for very long, I'm probably going to start talking to you about One Door. So there's been a lot of input in it. I can tell you that one of the reasons, as I mentioned earlier, different people have tried to do this is one individual put a large group, probably around 200 people in a room, and started having discussions. And when you put 200 people in a room and start talking about what do you need, you're never going to get anything accomplished. And so I would much rather get this up and running and see how we tweak it and see how we modify it and see how we enhance it, rather than try and please everybody up front, knowing that eventually it's just going to become so burdensome that nothing ever happens.
Okay, quick question. Are you going to can you send us this presentation?
Typically when I finish these kinds of presentations, I get an email asking for them. I think they go on, get connected. If you guys want it yourself, I have no problem. It's not anything super secret in here. I can send it to whoever wants it.
Okay, probably just send it to council members. I'm sure everybody could benefit from being able to reference back to it, because I'm sure we're going to have to come back to this. The UPD policy on this does not exist today, correct?
Well, the
thing doesn't exist.
Right, so there can't be a policy on how we're going to use it because it doesn't exist.
Are we going to have a chance to review that policy along the way of its creation as the program comes into play?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
I mean, we're not trying to hide anything here. We want it to be the best use of, we want to get out of the mental health field. And so we're going to create policy that gets us out of the mental health field. But we've got to do it in a safe and productive, efficient manner.
It sounds like the closest thing we were to this actually becoming a reality was a pilot being launched sometime in the not too distant future. Do I understand that correctly?
Yes, my goal, or the goal I've given the partners is, I will tell you January 2021. The other partners on here may throw things at me, but definitely within the first quarter of 2021, we should be running the crisis response team pilot and the facility. One of the biggest issues comes back to the last part of this presentation, and that is we can have all the policies we want. If we don't have people paying for it, it's not going to go anywhere.
Okay, thanks.
Totally understand. Dennis, I'll yield if we want to go to other people. I still have some more questions though.
Yeah, and I don't think we're going to be able to work out any details at all tonight. This is a lot to absorb, but okay. Well, we're at the discussion thing, and we do have one more person. Julie Lott wanted to ask a question. Julie?
Yeah, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Thanks for your patience. I don't know what was happening with my Zoom. Thanks very much for this presentation. I'm very interested. And just for everyone's clarification, my last name is pronounced Lout, just like, like the insult, you're a lout, but I'm hopefully not usually that. So I did have the question about timing that Jared had, so thank you for answering that and sort of like what you're hopeful for the 1.0 version of this. And then I guess in terms of my only question to follow up would be, in terms of the larger financial question, when we talk about freeing up police from dealing with these mental health calls, which sounds like a really smart thing to do in terms of capitalizing on the skills and specialties that people in other people in our community have. I wonder if you have done any assessment of what that will mean in terms of lessening financial burdens on the police, just in terms of how with our finite resources, we might need to shift some of, the money from that aspect that goes toward policing now toward this aspect of public safety.
I anticipated that question, and I still don't have an answer for it. So I would love to sit down with somebody much smarter than me on the financial end, because I don't know that you'll ever have at least in my mind, that you're going to have a definitive, viewable cost savings. So you're going to have a cost savings that the emergency rooms are going to have, because there's 700 and some odd people we take to the emergency rooms every year that, we won't prevent all of them going, but let's say instead of 760 going to emergency rooms this year, only 60 go, and the 700 go to one door. How do you measure that savings? I don't know.
Well, right, and I wouldn't really necessarily think of it as, I think it's kind of a nice way to think of it. It's like a pot of money that we're utilizing, right, to provide these different services. And it's just that a certain amount would be shifted then maybe to these, the city might be able to spend money on this service as opposed to, because the police aren't taking care of it anymore, if that makes sense.
Right. I really hear your answer. I mean, your question. It's been asked before, and we've had brighter minds than mine sitting in rooms having this discussion, and I've not come across somebody yet that can quantify that answer. There may be an answer. There may be a way to quantify it, and I would love to sit down with somebody who feels like they can, so that the next time the question comes up, I can sound more intelligent. But right now, I do not have a way to quantify that answer, other than to say there will be a system-wide savings. The jail's going to pay less, but where does that money go? And emergency rooms are going to pay less, but do they save? Does Carl save money, or does Carl take the money that they're saving the emergency room and put it into this? I don't know.
Right. Right.
So there's no new money is going to be created.
Right. No, I appreciate that. I appreciate your answer too. And maybe it's a question we could talk to, like Peoria or other cities who've seen this, and see if maybe they have a sense through their experience. I just think it'd be useful.
Peoria is actually cutting stuff down. Last I talked to them, they are funded. The city of Peoria and again, these might be old numbers. Last I knew, city of Peoria gave around $110,000 a year to the program. Everything else that they did was state funded, was grant funded.
I see.
And so the problem with doing everything 100% grant funded, or virtually 100% grant funded, is when your grant sources dry up, so does your program. And so that's why I think we need the community donations, we need the private entities, and we need the government funds, and we need the community thrown into the pot and not just grant funding.
Thank you.
Yeah. Was that all you needed to ask, Julie, at this time?
Yeah. Yes, that's it. Thank you.
Okay. I would just like to say that because of the wide community need and interest in this program to go forward, which seems to be almost universal from the input that we receive all the time, it would be really useful. And I don't know how one would feel comfortable in doing this, but it would seem like one of the greatest sources for new revenue would be to approach the community of faith, who have a lot of goals related to services in the community, healthcare, individuals, helping individuals through their life experiences, who may become perhaps involved in supporting these, just as they support food banks and other kinds of services in this community. I don't know if you've talked about this to the community of faith at all.
I have not personally taken it as a pitch. The church I formerly attended and the church I'm currently with right now, I've had conversations with different individuals. I'll let Rob get on here in a minute if he wants. I can tell you that, again, keep in mind, of the $2+ million that's needed to run this yearly, See You at Home, its budget is just shy currently of $1 million. And that is all donated money, or a large chunk of it. I'll let Rob ferret that out. But he does have a large contingency of faith-based money that comes in. So can churches do more? Can the faith-based community do more? Yeah, we're going to go and ask. We're going to talk to them. We're going to have these discussions. But they are part of the process once you expand this, because what they're already giving will be part of that baseline budget. Does that help answer?
Well, yes, thanks very much for letting us know that. And I'm sure that the answers are not going to come immediately, but I mean, with every question we have, there's got to be a solution, and there's a lot of creative people out there who will probably wish to put some attention on this. So I don't know, it's a very excellent initial presentation. I mean, unless there's anybody else who's quite needs to continue the discussion, I mean, we have the option to do that. Anybody else want to add new questions, or maybe just think about the questions we want to bring forward, in the future? Mary Alice, I see that you've asked for something. Go ahead.
Yeah, so thankfully some people have already asked some of the questions that I was wondering about. Joel, I'm wondering, you've given out some numbers for the county-wide in terms of, I think you guys call them CIT calls, right? Crisis Intervention,
yeah.
or CI, right? Do you know what percentage of the police calls in Urbana are those calls?
I can get that. I do not have it off the top of my head.
Okay, I think it would just be helpful for us to understand the impact that we would have on public safety in terms of the calls for service, if we had that. And then it seems to me like this has been a very complex problem with a lot of different agencies involved.
Mm-hmm.
And from what I'm hearing from you tonight, it seems like the administration of Urbana has just decided we're just going to move forward and try a pilot phase, and others who want to jump on it can, but we're going to move forward now. Is that a good synopsis of kind of what's been going on for the past 7 years?
Yes. So again, about 18 months ago, the environment shifted to the point that I took a second look at this and decided there's not a reason we can't do this. And I started moving forward with it.
So based on what Bill Colbrook's question was can other people use the service? It sounds to me like Joe and Rob, that this kind of partnership that you're talking about is at the moment custom made for Urbana, because
no
agents, is that correct or not correct?
At the moment, it's custom made for Champaign County law enforcement. So I mentioned earlier the Crisis Intervention Team Steering Committee, which is about 40, 50 people to meet every other month. Starting in January. All different stakeholders, providers, state's attorney's office, law enforcement. We all sit in a room and we talk about what are the issues, what are the needs, what are we doing, how can we work better together. The off months is the law enforcement community itself. So the large 5 police departments and METCAT sit in a room and we talk more into the weeds about what do we need. One of the things we got from that is a uniform reporting. So, beforehand, some departments weren't tracking any of the crisis intervention team calls. Urbana had a very robust way of counting everything. So we came up with a uniform so that everybody of the large 5 departments were all counting it the same. And that group that met on the off months, those 5 officers developed that form, developed that process. Each department has their own policy on what's going to happen, but to keep numbers similar, we all have pretty much the same policy. But Urbana is not telling Champaign how to do things. So as this moves forward, when I'm meeting on the off months as I'm meeting with the Crisis Intervention Team Steering Committee, and again, this goes back to, I don't remember who asked the question, it might have been Bill, about community involvement. Every month we're talking about this for the last 8 years. And so the community members who sit on that steering committee, and anybody really who's got an interest in mental health, it's not a closed committee. You can come in and sit on the committee. You come and share what your agency's doing and how they can better partner with the police. But this is a conversation that these, NAMI and others have taken back to their constituents and built. But on the off months, I've sat with the other police departments and we've shared what will work, what won't work, what do we need, what do we not need. And everybody pretty much has the same conversation of need and of wants. And I would imagine we'll all come up with a very similar, if not exact same policy.
So let me step back for a second and just kind of understand this pilot phase, which the hopes are will launch in January, or at least the first quarter of 2021. It sounds to me like, Joel, that Urbana is the only entity right now who is almost, not quite, committed to let's do the pilot program. I understand that the program is developed for Champaign County. But it doesn't sound to me like the Sheriff's Department and Champaign PD and all those people, they're not right now even talking about joining the, I mean, it's not that big of a deal. I guess what I'm trying to figure out is if we are going to serve the needs of Champaign County, and we're going to serve the residents of Urbana, what do other entities have in terms of a voice in shaping that?
Thank you very much for asking that question, because it's important, and I want to make sure we clear it up. The chiefs and sheriff in Champaign County have all seen this presentation. They've all got representation on the committee, and their representatives go back and have this conversation with their bosses. So Anthony Cobb and the sheriff, and I sat a week or so ago with the new chief at the U of I. They're all very aware that this is happening. The pilot's getting done in Urbana. First of all, when I first presented this to the chiefs, without question, they all said the same thing. And if I were a chief, I would make the same comment. Yeah, it sounds great. I want you to pilot it before I offer my police department up to it, so I know it's going to work. So I know that if you tried to do this, if you tried to take the crisis response team and launch it countywide without any, without a practice game or a pre-time with it, I can almost guarantee you'd fail, because this is a new concept it's a paradigm shift for law enforcement. It's a paradigm shift for the community receiving the services. It's a paradigm shift for how the services are provided by Rosecrans and by Carl. Everybody's got to rethink how they're doing things. And so if we started large scale on day one, that is a recipe for failure. So somebody had to pilot it. I work for Urbana. It seemed like the most logical place to pilot it. Had I gone to Dustin, if I had gone to Anthony, if I had gone to Craig Stone when he was here, if I'd gone to Bill Colbert, if I'd gone to any other police chief and said, can I pilot this with your department? They would have probably said yes. But it was most logical to pilot it here because I'm pushing it, I'm running it, and so why would I want to take it outside of my department? And so that's not a comment on them.
I understand.
Behind it, it's just we got to pilot somewhere. Urbana is the most logical place to do that.
And I would like to just kind of underscore some of what Joel has said in terms of having a long-term funding solution for something like this. This will require dedicated funds. We cannot rely on grant funds. We can't rely on fundraising. This is something that the city of Urbana and the other entities will actually have to dedicate funds to from our permanent budget. So I just kind of want to say that piece. I think it's great if we can get some of the other funds, but if it's going to be sustainable, then we have to have skin in the game.
This is not revenue producing.
No.
It's $2 million a year, roughly, every year. It's not, I mean, there can be some minor offsets, but as a general rule, it's going to have to find 2.1, 2.2, $2.3 million a year every year.
So I guess we will expect to see a budget amendment at some point in the near future if we're going to get this off the ground by January. So that's my final question for tonight. Thank you.
Hey, Jared. Do you want to speak, Jared? I see your hand up.
Hey, Dennis. Thanks for calling on me. I just want to make, we don't have a lot on the agenda tonight, so I just wanted to make the point. I don't know why we were trying to rush this conversation along, but I know we have public input to get to and we have a closed thing still to go to, but we didn't have a lot on the agenda. So I felt like tonight, if any night, would be a good night to have at least a semi-extended conversation about this.
Great.
I just want to bring up three quick things. Two of them are just comments. One of them is a question. Joel had said something along the lines of, responding to mental health isn't our job. And, you know, I know that it's easy to think in terms of, you know, well, people are saying that we don't, you know, want the police responding to mental health. But just on principle, I hope, and I know you well enough, Joel, to know that you don't really think this, but I just want to say, you know, mental health is everyone's job. Every day that all of us see somebody in crisis and choose to ignore them and choose to cast them aside as others, as not our problem and not something we have to deal with, that is an attitude that leads us to a society where we defund mental health programs. So it is our job. It is everyone's job to protect the people who are the most vulnerable in our communities. So I just wanted to say that. Second, and I want to ask this first before I make my final comments, because you said something that rung as a real big red flag to me right off the bat, and I just want to ask what you think the primary reason for this is. And when you were describing, you know, even, you know, getting into 2.0 or getting into a furtherance of this program that is more robust, that you said that this, even if this program gets to 2.0, it still won't be able to respond to all crisis calls, and that the police will still have to respond to crisis calls. And I just want to understand why you think that that would be the case. Is it just because it's already set up with a lack of resources that we can already tell today? Is it going to be able to withstand the volume of calls? What do you think is the limiting factor, and why CRT wouldn't be able to get to every CRT related call?
Sure, very fair question. And two responses to that. One is because you're not going to know every call up front is a crisis call. I go back to you go to the domestic, the couple who aren't getting along. Just because you aren't getting along doesn't make it a mental health issue, doesn't make it a crisis issue. There's other things. So you're not going to know every call. You know, the suspicious subject call, somebody checking car doors can turn into a mental health call. So you don't know up front that everything's a mental health call. And so officers are going to respond to these and have to be able to understand and recognize this is a mental health call. I need to get different resources on scene. The second would be, yeah, I think that my ideal world, yeah, let's build a crisis response team of, and I'm speculating here, but I think I could support it, 25 to 30 team member crisis response team. Let's put, so that you've got at least 2 people dedicated 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to each police department. We can do that. I'm not sure right now where we're going to find the $2.some odd million a year needed to run a 10-person crisis response as part of it. I don't know where we're going to find those funds. If we can find funds to run a 30-person crisis response team, by all means, let's do that. But I don't know that that's realistic up front.
So it is just a resource limiting factor from initial design.
I mean, yeah, you're going to have to hire that number of people, and you're going to have to manage that number of people, and you're going to have to pay for that number of people. And again, it goes back to you pay the police out of you know, well, I don't want to go down that road. You've got to identify the funds that are going to pay this service, and not through a grant, not through another means. It's going to have to be year in, year out, somebody's paying for this service. And the community's going to have to decide that that is what they want to do. I don't know that it's realistic to get it so that the police never, ever deal with somebody who's in crisis.
And that may not be possible. We all like to envision the ideal, but I would also, you know, challenge. I just want to make sure that it was clear that a 20-person team just already can be seen as like, okay, well, maybe they can get to 80% of what's out there today. I just want to make sure that was clear, because
if somebody wants to fund a 20-person team, we'll launch with a 20-person team.
Well, the community will tell us what they want us to fund. And if they feel like that they want to take that challenge on, then they'll make that known, because it's not up to us. It's up to the people we represent to make that call of how we spend our public dollars. But I would challenge you, Joel, just to think backwards about the first part of my question, and everyone to think about that first part of my question is when you illustrated, well, we don't know that every call would be a CRT call, and I would say that the same philosophy applies to any emergency call. We don't know that every call requires police, and I think that from the way that our community has spoken to us about how they want to see emergency response happen, I would almost say that we need to be shooting for the opposite, where police are, not CRT gets called last because they figured it out, but it's the police who get called because CRT has realized that this isn't a situation they can handle. I'm not saying that's a universal response for every kind of call that comes in, but that principle applies regardless. The police have a purpose, and this is the whole discussion we're having with community safety, public safety, and how we want to see responses come to them, because that same logic can be applied in the opposite direction of police, where it could be somebody else who responds first, evaluates the situation, and decides, well, we do need police officers to come and help us with this because the situation has gotten too violent. It's beyond our measure to control, unless the call comes in and it's just completely obvious that the police are the first people who need to respond to whatever that call was. Do you get what I'm going at there?
If I can give two responses. One, if I can address your statement you made up earlier. And if it sounded like I was trying to shed responsibility, I'm not. My goal would be for the police to run in the police lane and support the other teams throughout our community who run in their lanes. Currently, the police have been asked to do a lot of things that, like mental health, that is other lanes have been created, and for a variety of many other reasons have landed in our lap. So it's not that it's not our job, it's that we need to build a system so that the crisis workers do crisis work and the police do police work, and we support each other. It goes back to what I commented earlier about CIT national, international, will tell you that police officers go out and do the follow-up. I don't want police officers out doing the follow-up. I want crisis workers out doing the follow-up, because that's who's trained to do it. Not that it's not our responsibility, but that's who's trained to do it. And so that's the lane that should be out there doing that.
Sure, I'm just illustrating to be careful with the way that we frame that, because it matters how we frame those things.
If I could wave a magic wand and destigmatize mental health overnight, a lot of these problems would be gone anyway. A lot of how we view somebody who's in a state of crisis and sitting at a local coffee shop, if we understood that crisis, we wouldn't get so afraid of that individual as a society. So there's a lot more to this than just that. So yes, you're right, it's a societal problem, but we need to deal with it in each other's lanes and not try to make it somebody else's lane.
Okay, thanks, Dennis, I appreciate the time.
Sure. I don't know if there's any, and I see Bill's raising his hand before I call on you. I was just wondering if anybody else on the team that's been sitting here as a resource, either Heather or Rob, wanted to comment first before we go on. If you do, you could raise your hand. Otherwise, that's fine. Happy to see you here. Okay.
Hi, Dennis. Can you hear me, sir?
Yes, sir.
All right. Thank you for the time. And thanks, Joel. Yeah, I guess my one comment would be is for all of us to keep in mind, just how closely tied together mental health, homelessness, and substance abuse are. And the key of this, one of the keys in my mind, in the See You at Home vein of partnering, is because so many of our friends on the street, we identified that they do have substance abuse or mental health issues. And while it's difficult at times to get to the underlying issue of what is causing their homelessness, so often it is because of mental health and or substance abuse issues. So just from a See You at Home perspective, I've been thrilled about this project since Joel brought it to our attention, that now we can kill several birds with one stone and get people plugged in where they need to be. As a former crisis clinician, going into the emergency departments at Carl and OSF and other scenes about 7 years ago, I guess it's been now, before we had a year-round shelter, I would see, men and women in the emergency room, emergency department waiting rooms, in the emergency department, and if that's not necessarily where they need to be, or they don't necessarily need to be in jail, this program is a way that we can not only work better with the individual and possibly their loved ones to give them support as well, but it also has the potential to save the community, I believe, quite a bit of money. And so I just think that all of that put together is very encouraging, and how we can provide a better, more robust service for our friends on the streets and our community as a whole. As I said, so many of them have either mental health, substance abuse, or homelessness, and they're all just kind of interwoven. So I appreciate the time to comment on that. And I would welcome any comments even after this meeting, emails or calls. I'd be happy to sit down and tease this out more.
Thank you. And then Heather, do you want to make a comment at all?
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. So Carl is committed to providing clinical and financial support for the project in some manner. As Joel said, we're still very much in the planning process. And so what you're getting tonight, I think, is not a final project, which is why I think there are a lot of questions, and there will be a lot of questions. We'll continue to hash out those policies and those procedures as we move forward. But I think in bringing it to the council this evening was to kind of initiate those discussions and help us with some of the questions you've asked are great. They give us an idea of what we need to go back and look at if we haven't already considered it. So I appreciate the time for allowing us to present to you this evening.
Thanks so much also for being here. All right. I was wondering, let's see now, Bill, did you still want to have a comment or question?
Yeah, I just had a quick question to clarify finances. I also wanted to verify that Joel has been shopping this around to a lot of groups. I'm on the behavioral health work group at CU Public Health, and Heather is on that as well. And he came to us in September last year and made a presentation. I think it's a little bit farther along now, so it's nice to see the progress that's been made on it. There's about 17 or so community members on that, mostly people who work professionally in the mental health field, including some people on the mental health board. So that's my transition to finances. First is the 2.1 million, or approximately that. Does that include any Medicaid reimbursable expenses, or is that over and above that? And have you had conversations with mental health board, and are they at their maximum tax levy capability now? Is that a possibility, is to maybe have a referendum to increase that levy and have it funded through them a little bit?
Sure, good question. As far as how it gets reimbursed, I can't answer that. That would have to Rosecrans or one of the other providers. I don't understand exactly how all that works. As far as mental health board, Lynn Canfield and Mark Driscoll have been part of this conversation from day one. They've been a champion of this conversation. When I made the decision 18 months or so ago that I was going to start running with this again, the first phone call I made was to Lynn Canfield. The mental health board, as you know, they can't just say, hey, we'll give you X number of dollars. I got to come in and ask for it. Right now, we don't have that ask. We've got the 10,000 foot budget created, the understanding what is this going to cost. Now, what do we ask them to fund? Maybe they fund the peer support into this. Maybe they fund, I know that there's a lot of interest there from them. Maybe they fund part of the crisis response team. We have not created an ask specifically to them. Lynn can't commit money. Lynn can commit to supporting things. And I have no doubt that I am friends and know other people on the mental health board. And I think when we go to them for money, there will be some money there. I don't know, definitely not a huge part of it, but there will be some money there.
Okay. And Heather or Rod, do you happen to know what is the thinking on the budget far enough along to know if some proportion of that will be Medicaid reimbursable?
I can speak to the billing piece and Rob can speak to the budget piece, and it likely was not, given that we haven't nailed down specifically which services we'll be providing. There will be some services that will be reimbursable. Likely the CRT response in the field is not going to be a reimbursable service, but services offered at Open Door, whether through Carl or through a partnership with Rose Krantz, depending on who's the assessment crisis worker, we may be able to on site provide some or get some reimbursement for those services. But we would have to get a little bit further in the weeds to determine how much that revenue would be and start actually determining how many visits we think we would have and what services we would provide. And certainly while you can't rely solely on grant funding, the living room model, which is part of the One Door program, is a nationwide movement. And I think there will be opportunities for one-time dollars that will help boost some things as we go as well.
Okay, thanks so much. I'm not sure that we see any other people in City Council who are, okay, Jared's going to ask one more question.
Just one quick question that I didn't hear anybody talk about yet, and that would be transportation.
Maybe we could have Jared's image as a main speaker.
Oh, am I not showing up to you, Dennis?
Well, not at least as a main speaker. Okay.
So I didn't hear anything about transportation, and I just curious, you know, because Joel, you had said, you know, this isn't going to be a locked facility. This isn't a locked thing. Are people who are going to be transported to it going to be transported in a locked police vehicle, or are we going to figure out some kind of, maybe initially in a pilot, but are we going to figure out some sort of other transportation where a CRT related vehicle comes from this place where they can clearly understand that this is where they're, this is who's taking care of them and this is where they're going, and there's no confusion that they're going with the police to jail or something along those lines?
Sure. So there's throughout the country, other agencies and departments that have a similar program. They have different models. So in Peoria, their CRT, what they call CRS, Crisis Response Service, does their own transports. Right now, day one, the police or an ambulance will do that transport. Only you go back to because the comfort level and the training and the paradigm shift that's going to need to be done before CRT is going to be comfortable with doing their own transports. I can tell you that many of the individuals, I haven't always worn a coat and tie and sat in an office. It's not been that long ago that I was out in the street dealing with individuals in crisis. And those that get transported on a voluntary basis are almost always, I can't think of anybody off the top of my head, so I hate to say always, but there might be an outlier somewhere, understand when they get in that police car where they're headed to. In fact, won't get in that police car if they have the feeling that they're under arrest or that they're going to somewhere other than where the police said that they were going. If I lie to that individual and say I'm taking to point A and I take them to point B, the next time I deal with them, they're not going to get in my police car. So while I understand your question, I think right now for the best model is CRT to do the assessment, and if the individual needs to get transported, the police will do that transport.
Or an ambulance.
Or an ambulance, yes, or an ambulance.
That might be a better option too.
I don't want to hang an ambulance bill on somebody that can afford it.
Okay, and Dennis, one just quick point of order to you, Mr. Chair. I'm only seeing 3 emails and I only see 2 hands up for Correct. People who are raising their hands, and maybe more people will, but if we don't have an obvious 20, I think we should give everyone their 5 minutes.
Yeah, that's fine. I don't have a problem with that because, well, yeah, we have now 5 people who want to respond. All right. So I think that we're probably coming to the place where we're going to want to move to public input. But thank you very much for this presentation. And I'm sure we'll be speaking about it in the future.
Thank you for having me, and I'm very confident we'll be speaking about it in the near future.
You have a feeling, huh? Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
Do we now? Is there anybody on the city council who, before public input, wants to make any kind of like statement, generally at this point?
Could I make a statement?
Yes, Diane.
Just want to thank everyone for your questions. This presentation was meant to be an overview and an introduction to the program. I know it's a lot of information, but we did have time on this agenda, and we were really happy that the professionals from Rosecrans, Carl, and See You at Home were all able to be here tonight. So it was a great opportunity to get as many questions in as possible. And yes, this is not the last that you will be hearing from this program. It sounds like there's interest in at least moving ahead and exploring. And the value in a pilot is that it's a small enough bite that we can actually manage it. And a lot of questions will rise during the pilot, and hopefully they will be answered, and particularly related to the impact on the city, the impact on revenue and expenses and that sort of thing. So you got to start somewhere, and I think this is an excellent place to start. And I just wanted to thank Joel and the dozens of people who have worked on this for a long time to get us to this point.
I agree. Certainly, it's an important step, and I think Urbana should be very proud to be taking it. All right, so we're going to go to our public input, I guess, unless there's any other individual who must make a statement at this time. I see none, so, okay. So for public input, I see 7 people who are raising their hands, so we do have time, I think, to entertain a slightly longer discussion unless things change. I want to say first that we have received in the emails from about 7 people. The process for sending emails to the city council is that when they're posted, the individual's identity is redacted, according to my understanding. So I will just say that the individuals who've responded, I was going to read their names, but I don't know if that's possible. But I will say that one of the emails has to do with interpreting police arrest data on youth offenders to examine the racial equality and systematic failures and barriers to Black children. One concern about the direction that we are going with our police department. Perhaps some of those questions will be answered this evening. 2 emails concerning critiques about the FOIA presentation made earlier at a city meeting by city staff. 1 email about defunding the police and dropping charges against Elia Lewis. Another concerning the inaccuracy in statements made by Chief Seraphin regarding events during a demonstration held on the 23rd of June. And another individual has offered, again, the 6 demands from the Champaign County Anti-Racist Coalition for us to consider. And finally, 1 individual requests that the city and the Urbana Police Department consider providing security assistance for election judges in the upcoming election in November as they do their route to pick up ballots that are placed in drop boxes in our community. The concern is whether there would be a sense of security during that time and whether that would be a question that the police department can help assist and answer. So I guess we're now going to go to the members of the community who wish to speak. And I'm just going to do them in the order that I've received them. The first one would be Benjamin Stone. I think we could unmute Benjamin.
Yep.
Okay.
Hello, everyone. My name is Benjamin Stone. I live in Urbana, Illinois. I'm going to give a quick warning. I have Tourette's, so if I stutter or I happen to swear during the middle of it, let's all pretend we're adults and it's going to be just fine. So I wanted to say, first of all, big shout out to Celeste and your Urbana Free Library. Awesome presentation. Way to tell us how awesome the library is, because it is. Great information there. Also wanted to say, glad that after the community reached out to the city of Urbana and said, hey, we want more community involvement in mental health. The first presentation came from a group who said, all right, this will be, first of all, too small. Second of all, too expensive to maintain. Third of all, won't be ready for years. Fourth of all, involves two companies. Fifth of all, will frequently still involve the police. So I really appreciate that, you know, the community said, hey, we'd like more involvement in this. And he reached out and said, here's some companies with a lengthy, expensive plan that won't last. Anyway, to take your attention back to April 10th, y'all may be tired of that date. I imagine that a lot of other people are too, especially Aaliyah Lewis. Anyway, I'm going to take a little side route on that. I've been waiting for someone to talk about this and no one has. And you know what they say, if you see something, say something. So we're going to go straight back to that police presentation we have of the 911 call and the other juvenile suspect that is referred to in that. During the one that the police chief said is a demonstration of this is what the sort of what we want to have happen. See, the police description in the 911, or the perpetrator description in the 911 call was a boy walking up and down the street with a gun in his hand, stumbling back and forth in the street. So that's all we have it as a descriptor, okay? 55 minutes into your long presentation is the police presentation that night. The two officers who accost the juvenile suspect, they report the following. There's a black male in a gray sweatshirt and dark jeans. He is halfway between the park and the apartment building, walking towards me. At about 56:42, we hear dispatch say the following. That matches the description. That doesn't match the description of a boy walking up and down the street with a gun in his hand. That matches the description of someone walking nearby who happens to be black. At the time you're looking for someone who is black, you're assuming. So when we finally get the cameras on him, we see that he is nowhere near the middle of a street. He is on the ground. He's referred to as the juvenile that's being detained. Officers are dealing with that subject. And there's a great appreciation for, and I quote, the tactical response from the officers. They talk about how the officer is going to challenge him for farther back. So you're looking for the hands to be splayed out. We want them that way so that if an attack were to come, he's already being treated as though he will be violent, even though he does not match the description of the suspect, is not at the same place, happens to be nearby and black. So anyway, the police then proceed to lie to him. We were told frequently during the presentation not to speculate as the public, but this police officer says to this juvenile, we had a report that someone had a gun. Are you injured? We're going to pat you down. Then he says, we had a gentleman who claimed that he had a gun. That's a lie, as we all heard the 911 call. This is happening simultaneous to the other encounter with Aaliyah Lewis. There's been no cross communication. And he says he put the gun back in his waistband and shot himself accidentally. Again, speculation, officer, but as we know, police officers are allowed to lie about whatever the heck they want. And then they lift him. Then they lift this boy, this young man, this under 18-year-old juvenile that they keep saying suspect, potential offender. They lift him like meat. And the police chief says now they're going to move this juvenile behind the car so they can finish speaking to him. So now that they've established that he doesn't have a gun and hasn't shot himself, they're going to take him aside for more? This is preposterous. Why has no one else listened carefully to that presentation about, quote, this is sort of what we want to have happen? Go on back. It starts at 55 minutes and 0 seconds. It's repulsive to watch. And I'm kind of curious, the Urbana Police Department has not yet issued an apology to that young man, saying, we are so damn sorry that we traumatized you that night, that we smashed you into that sidewalk. But to be honest, I'm not really that surprised. Enjoy your night, friends.
Thank you for your input. Okay, the next individual will be Alan Axelrod. He can be unmuted. Alan?
Yes, I think I've unmuted. Can you hear me now, Dennis?
Yes, we can.
All right, let me go ahead and fetch my notes and get started. So, seeing as I have 5 minutes, I first want to start off with the census. I live in Ward 3, and I've never had my door knocked on, with the exception of a church group, and that was only once. Not even on Halloween do I have my door knocked on, and the census has already knocked twice. Good job. The other thing that I wanted to start off with is that I would like to thank Mayor Diane Marlin for advocating on our behalf to the governor when he visited last week about the utility shutoffs moratorium and the eviction moratorium, credit where credit is due. That's much appreciated. I'm going to be sending an email to Jared tonight about additional concerns regarding timelines with the eviction moratorium in the event that it's not extended by the governor. There is a gap that is concerning, but the rest of my comments is going to be responding to the presentation. In particular, the presentation basically over the course of 90 minutes plus outlined a pattern or a system where you will have police respond first to a situation, probably due to liability, although we have seen from earlier instances where a police officer had a temper tantrum that there is a lot of liability with that. I did not hear, although again, it was a very long presentation, I did not hear, waiting for this siren, 1 second. I did not hear during the presentation any structure with one door that would mitigate the temper tantrum by the police officers on April 10th. I said plural because it was multiple. When we have multiple police officers losing their temper, how can we trust them to follow this program as advised, as designed? I think that that needs to be revisited when it comes to how this deployment would work. Why can't there be anybody with the officers to have authority and assessment as to which to pursue? Secondly, this does not address, and still has not yet to address, the fact that the police chief Seraphin had stated in the same presentation that the earlier speaker was referring to. He stated that de-escalation was not their top priority because they believed a gun to be present, in which case they were right that a gun was present. But let's just acknowledge that any time that de-escalation can be made secondary is severe and worthy of scrutiny. So I want to see this program have explicit prioritization of de-escalation as part of the assessment process, and to have supervision of the police as they have currently demonstrated, or as they have demonstrated that they are not always capable of keeping their emotions in check to where they lash out at a community member who has made no aggressive motions, who is not matching the description of the suspect. And again, there was a request by that person that was not acknowledged or respected by the police to have a different officer, a female officer, come and do the pat down. So those are basically the remarks that I wanted to express, in that this presentation was very lengthy. It did not seem to address those points. I hope to be wrong. I hope that those are already included. And if not, I expect and hope that those are included. So again, to emphasize, an explicit prioritization of de-escalation as the first thing. The specific example that Police Chief Seraphin said was, after someone is detained, then they can de-escalate. To which I ask, what is the point? And the second is, again, non-police supervision of the police on deployment for suspected mental health issues, or just in general. I spoke to you for the very first time on July 17th, 2017, And it was specifically about needing to deploy something other than police armed with guns to respond to situations. So I want to see something like that in this program if we're going to invest resources in it. Do we have somebody, some staff, some tiered non-armed officer, just like they have tiered employment for UPS, other unions have tiered employment systems. Why can't the Fraternal Order of Police have that too? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Alan. The next individual will be Austin Hoffman.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi, my name is Austin Hoffman. I'm an Urbana resident in Ward 5. First, I want to say it was wonderful to hear about the work our library has done in the last year and the resources and services they have provided during the COVID-19 crisis, especially. Excellent work. In regards to the One Door program, I'm really glad this conversation is happening. A few questions and challenges that I noted during Mr. Sanders' presentation. First, I would like to see a mental health professional or counselor, doctor, healthcare professional of some sort giving this presentation. I realize they were here for consultation, but you all don't have medical doctors giving presentations about crime statistics and police shootings, so I don't know why you have a police officer giving a presentation about a program for mental health and crisis prevention. That said, I'm still encouraged to hear that this model is meant to phase out police entirely. Police have no place in our healthcare system at all. And while we work to make them obsolete, they should be the absolute last resort. Mr. Sanders said advancing the One Door program necessitates injections of capital. And so I know where that money can come from, and I think most of you do. How about using the $120,000 you took from the police budget in June and taking out another couple million to meet the $1.292 million figure that he outlined? Take it from the $11 million you already give to the cops. The money is there. There are your dedicated funds. This is not a mystery. It is ridiculous to suggest that our community, which is already facing a looming crisis of unemployment, eviction, and utility shutoffs, should foot the bill for this. That is the sort of rationality of austerity that got us here in the first place. I would much rather subsidize comprehensive, non-coercive mental health services with my taxes than the police. In June, Chief Seraphin and Chief Cobb recently appeared on the podcast Penny for Your Thoughts, and they said they need to know what defunding the police really means. Well, this is it. A program that could potentially help our community and reduce the criminalization of mental illness needs money. The police are hoarding 32.7% of our city's discretionary budget. It's time to loosen those purse strings. Next, the term super user I feel is highly problematic. This term seems connotative of addiction, social ostracization, and moral depravity. It seems very dehumanizing. These are people just like you and me. They have struggles and personal crises just like you and me. So I would encourage you to eliminate that term. I see no reason why you can't keep track of those that frequently are in crisis while not using that designation. I also want to echo the concerns of Alan Axelrod in terms of the fact that the One Door program seems to have little substantive checks on the discretionary power of police to brutalize and kill people. And finally, I just want to remind us all that systemic racism is not limited to the police. They are just the most overt manifestation of the white supremacy that is at the core of this nation. Our community and you as a council, we all need to challenge ourselves to consider how the mental health system itself also perpetuates processes of criminalization, policing, and surveillance. There are many similarities between prisons and mental health or psychiatric institutions. In the American mental health system, Black, Indigenous, and people of color are also overrepresented. These systems often disregard the rights and safety of trans and gender nonconforming people as well. They also inflict violence in many ways, such as forcible medication, physical restraint, and limited access to the outside world. In short, systems also operate according to carceral logics and pathologize Blackness and poverty. So in order for a program like this to be successful, it needs to be led by and for folks who experience mental illness, trauma, and neurodivergence. This is what Councilman Miller was alluding to, I believe, in some of his questions. So as one model, I would encourage you to look up Project Let's, which is a mental health model operating outside the prison industrial complex, or what some would call the medical industrial complex as well. So that is Project Let's, L-E-T-S, projectlets.org, which is a transformative justice model led again by and for people who have experienced mental illness, neurodivergence, and trauma at the hands of our woefully underfunded and exploitative healthcare system. So thank you for having this discussion. Thanks for your time. And I look forward, as always, to seeing substantive anti-racist action from you all on this.
Okay, thank you, Austin. All right, next is Tracy Chong.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. I'm Tracy Chong, a resident of Urbana. Tonight, I just want to remind City Council and let the public know that the roadblocks that the government of Urbana has created to prevent residents from obtaining public records through the Freedom of Information Act, FOIA, are still in place. Nothing has changed, even though City Council made a big show of having a FOIA presentation on July 20th. The city is still charging outrageous fees in exchange for public records. The city claimed during the July 20th presentation that only 2 recurrent requesters have been subjected to those fees. This is an outright lie. During that same presentation, Urbana City Attorney James Simon made it sound like the hurdles were not actually hurdles because residents who were charged the fees could obtain a fee waiver based on a list of criteria. Well, this is another lie to the public. I emailed Assistant City Clerk Elizabeth K. Mihari on July 23rd, requesting a fee waiver and explaining that I met the criteria listed by James Simon. Up to today, my email has been ignored, and I have not received the Urbana Police Department public records requested. I have not heard back from Ms. Mihari or anyone else from the city regarding the fee waiver since July 23rd. That's close to 1 month. Lies, just more and more lies told week after week. When is this going to stop? It just seems that the solution City Council has whenever problems are brought up is to arrange for another presentation. The ironic thing is that the presentation is usually given by the person who is trying to justify their misconduct. Do you seriously expect an honest presentation? Did you expect Chief Serafin to give an honest presentation after the Aaliyah Lewis incident? Did you expect James Simon to give an honest presentation when his goal was to explain the FOIA hurdles and misconduct of city staff? Elizabeth K. Mihari, James Simon, FOIA Officer Kurt Borman, UPD FOIA Officer Tony Wack, Police Chief Brian Serafin, and anyone else complicit in these lies and effort to obscure transparency, including Mayor Marlene herself, need to be replaced. These city staff and Mayor Marlene are not upholding the city of Urbana's core values and mission. City Council members, if you are okay with city employees lying to the public and giving presentations that serve their own interests, what are you even doing here as elected leaders? Maybe you should just resign and let others who are willing to ask the difficult questions and take steps that the public has been asking for to take your place. About the one-door presentation, I have to go back and review the presentation and question and answers closely, but I have some preliminary questions. Seems like the source of money is a big unknown, even after more than a year of Sanders working on it, which is a big problem that's not worked out. Is any of this money coming out of the UPD budget? If I understand correctly, it seems like the pilot program needs training for officers' response during the initial contact and training for officers' role in a mental health crisis. Why is this new? The officers already should be undergoing training for how to respond to all sorts of scenarios, including de-escalation. I really hope that Urbana Police Department is not asking for additional money or budget to train the officers and to start this program. In fact, shouldn't money be coming out of the police budget if the goal is to transfer this responsibility away from law enforcement? Finally, I agree with Jared Miller. We really should have access to all this information before council meeting. I'm not sure why Lieutenant Sanders sounded reluctant to hand over the presentation, but I hope that it can be put on Urbana's website so that we can go through it and ask more questions to make sure this is something the public wants and not just another thing created by the police department to, I don't know, just to put on a good show. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next up would be Sarah Nixon. Sarah?
Hello, this is Sarah Nixon. I'm a resident of Urbana and just have a few comments in response to the presentation this evening about the proposed one-door pilot program project, pilot proposal. Not sure exactly what it is called. I was gobsmacked. What I heard tonight truly in no way resembles what I feel the Urbana community has been led to believe that we could expect from this one-door idea that has been alluded to and promoted for the past several months as a response to the people's outcry and call for a reduction of police involvement in non-criminal calls, non-criminal situations. So what I heard was honestly was the exact opposite of what I had been led to expect. So if the goal was to reduce and ultimately substantially reduce, I've even heard, the idea of eliminate police involvement in calls that would be responding to crisis issues related to, say, mental illness, substance abuse, family violence, domestic violence, and so on. The one-door program presentation proposes the exact opposite. What I heard was a program presented to the council and the public by a police, a law enforcement individual. I don't know if he's a lieutenant or a sergeant, but he's a police officer. And what I heard from that spokesperson about this project was that it would be run by police. It would be controlled by police. It would be designed by police. And it comes with a massive price tag of $2 million, which is apparently intended to go to fund a massive renovation of a building that is not even in Urbana. Again, I'm just gobsmacked. If there were $2 million available, that money, those funds need to go to the people, to those who need it. They need those funds, if they exist, need to be transformed into resources to train community members to participate in the first response, crisis response process. That funding, which again is evidently putative, would need to be directed towards creating prevention programs, support programs, mental health support. There are obviously so many areas, and I'm not an expert in social services, but the last place this money, which again apparently does not exist, should go would be to fund a group of law enforcement individuals who have a vision as to how to maintain their grip on the crisis response scenarios. I heard so many things that were concerning, and I have no doubt that, or at least I hope that at a later point, I'll have time to organize more in a more orderly way my concerns. Let me just quickly check my notes. I agree with the speaker who pointed out that we want to hear from healthcare professionals, we want to hear from psychologists, but we most of all want to hear from the community. And yes, that's another major concern here. We've heard nothing about the city leadership engaging the community. We were promised that would happen. I've heard of no listening sessions. I've heard of no surveys, no focus groups, no conversations, and then you present this evening as a fait accompli, and at least a couple of council members raised the issue that they're really concerned that nobody presented them with any data, any information related to this proposal ahead of time. So extremely concerned. And as I wrap up, I will note too that there seems to be an effort to inject a religious sort of agenda into this program. It should be a secular program, and it should be receptive and embracing of all walks of life and of all religious paths. So I guess I'll wrap up my thoughts on this one door thing, and hopefully we'll have another opportunity to discuss this. I urge the city council, in fact, to schedule a major meeting for the community before any decisions are made. And I echo those who are urging that clearly the funding for this needs to come from the police budget, not from people's donations and fundraising and so on. And as my last note, I want to respond to the person who suggested, I think it was Benjamin.
You are getting out of time now, Sarah.
Okay, well, the last note then is about Aaliyah. So Mr. Stone, no, we are not tired of talking about Aaliyah, and I'm glad you raised the issue. And we, the people, will continue to talk about that outrage until justice and an appropriate response has been achieved. Thank you.
All right, we all have 5 minutes. Please try to keep your comments within 5 minutes. Next, Meg. Please introduce yourself, Meg.
Hi, everybody. Sorry. Yeah, it's Megan McDonald. I'm from Ward 5. And yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
You say yes? Okay, cool.
Yes.
All right. So, dear Mayor Marlin and the rest of the City Council, my name is Megan McDonald. Like I said, I really found that library update very interesting and kind of sad. Like Mary Alice pressed about, hotspots are incredibly important, especially for underserved children during this international pandemic, with remote learning being such a high need. The library is buying Chromebooks and is trying to fill this education budget deficit that some of you are essentially responsible for. There's no shortage of money in this town. A lot of it is in the police budget. A lot of it's just being misused. It's not being used for community needs. It's being used for community policing. Some of you have been sitting on this council for almost 10 years, voting yes time and time again for the police budget to increase, not really giving it a second thought. Yet when you have to cut the budget for the city overall, as is the case in recent years, the library's budget gets cut as well. So, I mean, how do we not see the connection here? In reference to the News Gazette archives, the racial justice archives that the library wants to collect, when protests and articles from this time are viewed in the future, where will you be in those write-ups, in those pictures? Nowhere to be found. One protest. You showed up to one protest the day that the Urbana courthouse shut down because of fear-mongering. My friends sat in jail in disgusting conditions for an unnecessary additional 24 hours without bail, with 10 other women in a cell that was non-compliant with COVID-19 safety precautions. In the archives, you will not be mentioned in admiration, especially in the pieces written by the grassroots organizations by the community. You won't be found speaking out about the injustices protesters faced against vehicular assault. It will be found that Mayor Marlin and now resigned Eric Jacobson fought against a 4% police budget cut and then got it down to 2%. It'll come up that Mayor Marlin lied about the Aaliyah Lewis case original 911 call. There'll be mentions of Dennis Roberts sending boilerplate, copy and paste responses to real concerns from his constituents, voting for cops in schools, reinstating the police chief, Parkland cop Bill Colebrook pushing and inquiring about the money for these new mental health crisis services, but defending every piece of militarized armor the cops have money budgeted for. This is the most I've seen him speak in weeks. Julie Lout is at her third meeting, and she's being the most direct about moving funds from the police budget, aside from Jared. To ask the community and private entities to fund this new mental health response program while millions and millions sit in the police budget is just astonishing. The police get to keep all their money, their power, their abuses of power, and keep showing up to these calls. The same police who have been apparently just fine keeping the money while admittedly failing up these duties up until now. Mayor Marlin, we have documented you changing your website to no longer reflect your endorsement of the police union. Now is an empty write-up about systemic racism. You know who is affected by systemic racism? Aaliyah Lewis and the 27 protesters from May 31st. You know who's affected by the school to prison pipeline? The subject our chief of police is so boldly knows nothing about, apparently. Aaliyah Lewis and the 27 protesters, they're affected by it. You don't think it's all connected? I do. I see it. 89% of the 54% children cops in schools throw in jail are Black. Yet Chief Seraphin pretends to have no idea what the answer to this $10 million question is. Why are Black adults and children vilified, criminalized, and jailed at a higher rate than folks of other races? Systemic racism. You all would do well to push our chief and yourselves to truly research, learn, and listen and respond to the community and the experts on this. Sorry, my notes just closed. Anyways. That one-door presentation was not great. Enhances but doesn't change the responses and the resources we have now to improve relations with law enforcement is a quote I'm pretty sure I heard. That is not what we want. We do not want the police involved in this, in the mental health crisis responses at all. 5 to 8% of people are arrested in mental health crisis. That should be a 0% number. How many of these people are Black? So when this grant runs out, so does the program? What a lackluster, unprepared, hollow solution. He didn't even have the number of calls that are made to the UPD for mental health crisis. Why do we have to work harder than you all? Over $11 million spent on the police, but we're concerned where to get $2 million consistently for a crappy collaboration between cops and Rosecrans? Are you starting to get it yet? It's so blatantly obvious. We are not asking you to redefine or enhance the police. We are asking you to defund the police, abolish the police, use that money to get people resources to improve their lives, their well-being, their home life, get rid of systems of power that only exist because racism exists, laws that only exist because racism and classism and ableism exist. We're asking you to stop making us have to work so hard to do your job for you, telling you about extending the eviction moratorium, telling you to take cops out of schools, telling you to be strong and be brave when you renegotiate the police union contracts.
Time now to close it, please.
Okay, anyway, drop the charges. And I hope community members know that candidacy guides are up for city council seats. So you could run for these people's seats. Night.
Thank you for your public input. Next, who's raised her hand is Christopher Hansen. Christopher.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Hi, my name is Christopher Hansen. I've been an Urbana resident for 18 years. During the library presentation today, it was interesting to see how many records that Urbana is keeping in storage and the incredible effort and expense that is being put into making those documents available to the public is remarkable. And perhaps that is a reflection of some of the things that we value in Urbana. It's also impressive to see the huge spectrum of materials available to residents of Urbana. And it seems like Urbana residents could find almost anything they could possibly want. And if something isn't available, that our library staff will make an effort to find it for that person. I wonder why Urbana is doing the opposite for documents related to the Urbana city government. The Urbana Library is going out of their way to accommodate the community. Meanwhile, Urbana's legal department goes out of its way to put roadblocks in front of residents seeking public records. I wonder why the Urbana Library has been able to find a way to trade books with the public during the pandemic, but the Urbana Police Department could not find a way to accept police complaints during the pandemic. When Mayor Marlin talks about Urbana residents who take a strong interest in Urbana records, she describes them as mischievous villains. She publicly demonizes people who submit FOIA requests as though they are pesky parasites for taking an interest in their own government. I wonder what that says about the values of the city of Urbana. This issue has been raised before, and the city's solution was to give a presentation on FOIA wherein they dispensed a number of lies to the council and the public. Those lies, largely told by City Attorney James Simon, have since been very much brought to light, but no one has acknowledged it. This is how I currently see the Urbana city government. We have this kind of Trumpian government where instead of real meaningful response, we just get a bunch of lies and everyone in the government just pretends it isn't happening. And I'm wondering why the sitting council members are so content with the situation as it is. Is it just because having honest discussions is difficult? Is it because our city government is so incestuous that no one wants to question anyone else? As far as I can tell, Jared Miller is the only council member who seems to have an understanding of the value of transparency and the value of having difficult, open conversations. But Jared is in the minority, and instead of actually having honest conversations about difficult issues like policing, the ultimate plan is to push that off onto some mysterious advisory committee. One thing that seemed to be completely missing from today's conversation about One Door, as has been pointed out, was a frank conversation about where all the money is coming from. Mr. Sanders spoke broadly about private donors and money coming from the community, but what he did not mention was any money coming out of the police budget, and that is exactly what many people have been asking for. Julie Lout tried to ask about this, but she couldn't get an answer, and then Sanders changed the narrative from reducing the burden on police to reducing the burden on local emergency rooms. It was quite a sight watching Sanders dance around the point of taking funding from the police budget. So I really hope everyone picked up on Mr. Sanders' stories about mental health assistance actually reducing police calls. What that means is that if we go in this direction, according to Mr. Sanders, we should see an ever decreasing need for police and therefore an ever decreasing police budget. Back to this mysterious advisory committee that's been spoken about a little bit here and there, but has never been defined. I want to remind you once again that the city of Urbana did have something called the Community Alternative Policing Advisory Committee. And that seems to have been closed down 2 or 3 years ago by the mayor. And then it was supposed to be folded into the other committee we had, which was called the Mayor's Neighborhood Safety Task Force. And that hasn't met for, again, 2 or 3 years. Once these became under Mayor Marlin, they were dissolved in some way. And for some reason, the task force, Mayor's Neighborhood Safety Task Force webpage seems to have just been recently deleted from the city website, which is weird because Mayor Marlin still has it listed on her personal election campaign website. So as you go forward and talk about this police advisory committee, I really encourage the council to discuss these 2 other boards, which did exist and which were dissolved. And I want you to discuss how effective these boards were and why did they disappear. And seeing that I have a little bit of time left, I'm just going to mention that everything that Benjamin Stone said earlier about the Lewis incident was entirely accurate. I find his outrage to be entirely justified, and it still mystifies me that the mayor and the council are not seeing the situation as clearly as many members of the public are seeing it. And I wonder if we asked the question differently, if maybe we'd get an answer from you. What if I said, does the Lewis arrest reflect the values of the city of Urbana? If I asked it that way, I wonder how you members of the council would answer it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Christopher. Next, we have raised a hand from Carrie Christine Brown-Tess. Carrie, you're going to be unmuted.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. First of all, I want to say thank you. This is my first time speaking at a city council meeting that didn't involve like very positive things talking about the work my students was doing, so excuse my nervousness. But I'm also coming here to, hearing the comments before, and I think a lot of the comments before kind of echo some of the things that I want to bring forward. And I think that I also want to say that I'm coming here as a person who really cares for you as my city council members. I see you as my community. I see you as a part of, who makes this space what it is. And so, excuse me if I am very emotional about this, but I feel like we're all in this together, and I care for you. I care for the people who are making these comments. And so I want to speak from a space of, we are all in this together, and this is the foundation of where I'm speaking. I was so moved by Benjamin's comments, his passionate call for response about the abuse of a child. And I'll say, essentially, that's why I am participating tonight. What happened with the young man, I think, is essentially something that we have a problem with in the city. And the reason why I was wanting to comment was in watching the video with Aaliyah Lewis. Watching the video with Aaliyah Lewis has created so much heartbreak in myself. I know I already have a fear, just generally, of like living in a world that's anti-women. Watching men sit over a woman, holding her hands with 4 automatic weapons, punching her. Like, I can't tell you the trauma that I have felt, and that it has been so hard for me to speak without tears in my eyes about what I saw. It was so heartbreaking. And then to see my city council, when I came to that first city council meeting, I've been coming to these meetings, but I don't really say anything. And when I saw that first meeting, I was so broken up over the way that the city council seemed to attack her versus addressing policy. And what do we do as police? Like, you have no, she's just a human, she's a citizen. You're not responsible for training her to do anything. Your responsibility is to talk about police and what the role of police are in these situations. And so I was like doubly heartbroken to see that. And I'm saying this as someone who really does care for you, and I love you guys as public servants and the work that you do. It's taken me a while to say this, but I am a bit heartbroken over what I saw. And I just want to say, like, also watching the video and hearing the voice of the young boy who was like, did he just punch her? And juxtaposing that to the call for a job, to hire someone to manage the image of police. I just feel like we have it so wrong, guys. Like, I don't know how to say this, but the problem isn't the image. The problem is what we're doing, and we have to work towards healing. I don't know, seeing this presentation tonight, I don't know if it's in this way. I think 100% we need to be working to, one, apologize for the ways that we have oppressed people in our communities. We need to apologize and be reaching out in humble and caring, open-hearted ways to our Black community, to our Latino community. And by Black community, I also want to include our African community that often gets completely sidetracked in these conversations. And I think we, with humility, need to just care and act in care towards the citizens of our community. And I think that does not entail a job that who's working to create an image of police, but instead working to create healing from the work that the police have already done. And what I mean specifically the violence against Black and Brown people, but specifically Black and Brown women, Black and Brown children. And okay, I see my time is up. Thank you so much for hearing my words.
Certainly. Thank you for participating. Okay, next, Kathleen Sawyer. I believe you'll be unmuted. Kathleen? Can you hear me, Kathleen?
Kathleen, I've allowed you to talk. You'll need to unmute your microphone in the lower left-hand corner.
Oh, I didn't want to. I think it was accident.
Oh, okay. That's fine. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Then, thank you then for commenting on that. The last person is Amina Payne. Amina?
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, wonderful. Firstly, I would like to echo Chasey Chong's statement regarding FOIA. You all are very aware all of the FOIA requests I have put in and have received. However, after receiving the juvenile data, I coached one of my friends who had never submitted a FOIA request and wanted to know how to do it. I gave them instructions and my exact wording to receive the exact information that I received. They received a response stating that the information that was sent to me, the juvenile arrest data, is couched in categorical terms and requires an extensive search for the records. So they were not able to receive the exact same information that I requested. It's very clear that the public is not able to request information that should be available to them, and that is something that is incredibly discerning. I also forgot to, I guess, state my name. My name is Amina, and I'm a dual resident. I feel like it's really important for me to state that because I am a resident of Urbana. I vote in Urbana elections, but I am currently living in Australia. I'm also writing to encourage action on the data presented last week by Chief Serafin, where he felt the need to clarify, showing that 82% of juvenile arrests in 2019 were of Black children. So when we see data like this, we need policy to change, and that comes from you. I would urge you in your next meetings to set aside time to discuss study sessions and put forth amendments or whatever else, other options you need to do as council members to be prepared and do something with this data. Find out the answers to your questions. Why do the data look like this? What neighborhoods are these children from? These were great questions raised by Sharice. And the public and the ACLU and many other organizations have these same questions. Now, city officials such as Mayor Marlin, Chief Serafin, Julia Reitz have access to much more of the data than the public can gain access to. Now, we also are well aware that there's a criminal analyst on the police payroll. Now, the whole point of a criminal analyst is to identify trends and arrest data. However, that's obviously not being done, or it's not been a priority. So I implore that it is vital to understand data, understand these trends, which is a great first step. Now, I'm coming here consistently every week, despite teaching 3 tertiary level courses whilst also undertaking my master's. And I'm willing to even use my own time and expertise to look through this data. I've let you all know that I do have human research ethics training, and I do understand how to handle sensitive data sets. So if the criminal analyst and the police refuse to do this, please hand it over to someone who will. It's clear that this has not been a priority, but it is a priority so that we can start having better informed discussions and tailored solutions. So perhaps you as council members can hold Mayor Marlin and Julia Reitz to these ideas and programs that they supposedly advocate for. They mentioned that some of their steps are to involve working towards getting state redeploy funding for alternatives to juvenile incarceration. I don't know, I haven't heard much about this, so I'm interested. Now, you all probably remember Kawani Carrington. He was a student at the READY program. Now, READY is a regional safe school, and it's where Urbana sends its students who are up for expulsion without having to count them as expulsion. If you look at federal or state data about expulsions or FOIA this data from Urbana, you'll notice that Urbana has expelled almost no students over the past 10 years. A small number of students do well at READY, and a large number get banned from the building where READY is housed, the terminal building, which means that they're out on the street for the remainder of their expulsion. Now, 2 officers responded, shot, and killed 15-year-old Kawani Carrington on Friday, 9th of October, 2009 at approximately 1:30 p.m. This was during a school day. Okay, so the city paid out over $400,000 to former Officer Dan Norberts, who killed the 15-year-old. And in 2000, Officer Norberts was one of several officers who beat a disabled man in an alley. So why was he responding to this call in the first place? So I'm going to wrap up because I see my time is ending. But what I'm seeing here and striving to point to are the vast systemic failures and barriers for high hope Black children, and I'm hopeful that you'll see a way forward and work together on solutions with transparency and accountability. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay. Next, Sarka Perkova. Sarka.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. This is Sarka. I have a little more of a question than a direct complaint. So I moved into East Urbana about a year ago, and recently, maybe starting around Memorial Day or beginning of summer, maybe, I have started, or we have started noticing a strong smell. Maybe asphalt or tar-like smell, petroleum-based product-like smell. I have been trying to figure out where it's coming from. And so I joined the East Urbana Facebook group, and I noticed a comment asking, anyone noticing a strong smell in the air, gas, or is it coming from dirt? And a lot of people in their neighborhood, I can share with you more comments if you like, have been noticing the same thing, that every now and then, typically when the winds are coming from the north, there is a strong smell of asphalt, okay? And it is released overnight, so you don't notice it until the morning, and it feels very unhealthy, toxic. It causes, for me at least, headaches. So we try to track down where the smell is coming from, and I have a feeling, or we have a feeling, that it's coming from a company called Emulsicoat, which I think was allowed to make these asphalt products very close to downtown Urbana. So I would like to inquire and asking about the details and whether there is going to be any change about this.
Okay, thank you for your question. Certainly you're correct. There is an asphalt production company north of the railroad tracks in East Urbana at the location of a previous roundhouse and a train repair shop. It's been there probably since the 60s, or I'm not quite sure when it was established. And there is an individual in our city staff who has occasionally gone out to measure the quality of the air. And if you send me, Dennis Roberts, your email, I will make that connection for you. Thank you very much, Sarka. Seeing no other individuals, that the public input now is closed. And we're going to move on to staff reports if there are any. Mayor, are you aware that there's any staff report this evening?
Not that I'm aware of. I do have one announcement, and that is there will be a table at the Urbana Market at the Square outside the market for to assist people in answering the census. So there will be people tabling at the market from here on to the end of September. And last Saturday, we got about 20 people signed up for the census, so that was good. There's also folks in the neighborhood, of course, but there will be a table at the market. Just an item of information for the upcoming closed session. You'll need to go into your email. Wendy Hundley has sent you the Zoom link in an email that just came.
So I guess the next thing is that we would need a motion to go into closed session.
Dennis, I have a question.
Yes?
So it's 10:15, the meeting, I'm assuming that the closed meeting is going to go beyond 10:30. I don't know what procedure is for that.
Probably the best thing to do would be to extend our meeting, to make a
Should we-
motion to extend the meeting.
Can I ask how, I don't know how long the closed session will go.
Shouldn't
What would
take
be
too long.
So should we extend the meeting until 11 just to cover our bases?
Yeah, it won't take that long though. But yeah, I would extend it to 11. That'll cover your bases.
All right, I'll make a motion that we extend our meeting to 11 p.m.
Second.
Okay, we have a second from Cerise. Any other comments? All those in favor indicate by saying aye. We have to do a roll call. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Miss Wu,
Yes.
Miss Lout,
Yes.
Miss Hersey,
Yes.
Mr. Brown,
Yes.
Mr. Roberts,
Yes.
Mr. Colebrook,
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Mayor Marlin.
Yes.
All right, so having extended the council meeting, the committee of the whole meeting, is there a motion to go into closed session pursuant to imminent litigation according to Illinois Statutes 5 ILCS 120/2 C11?
Move to go to closed session.
I'll second it.
Okay, Charisse and Will seconds it. All those, okay, we have to have a roll call for this one. Madam Clerk, would you help us with that?
Yeah, just a minute. I'm trying to get my doggone phone, this thing up here.
Okay.
Okay. Miss Wu,
Yes.
Miss Lout,
Yes.
Miss Hersey,
Yes.
Mr. Brown,
Yes.
Mr. Roberts,
Yes.
Mr. Colebrook,
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Mayor Marlin.
Yes.
Okay, I guess we're gonna go and we'll sign in using a new URL.
Even though everyone's not here yet, I'm gonna put the motion on the floor so we do it on time to come back into open session.
I'll second. So as soon as our chair gets in.
We've got,
You've got a quorum.
Yeah, but our chair's not here.
can I go ahead and do it?
There's Dennis.
There he is.
Dennis, there's a motion on the floor from Jared, seconded by myself, to come out of closed meeting.
Okay, thank you. All right, would the clerk please call the roll? Or do we have to have a roll call?
Yes.
I thought so.
I don't see Phyllis. Councilmember Wu,
Yes.
Lout. Is she here?
No.
She's by phone.
Oh, she is. She's here, but she's muted.
Oh, Percy?
Yes, Julie, this is Julie.
Okay. Brown?
Yes.
Roberts?
What?
You're voting yes? Colebrook?
Yes.
Miller?
Yes.
If you ask me, it's yes for me.
Okay.
All right, so we've come out of closed session. I guess that passes. And seeing no further business, we are adjourned.